Hi, I'm Dante,
And I'm Tommy.
and you're listening to Twigging Onto Twig, a podcast where we talk about Wildbow's most badged web serial, Twig.
In today's episode, we talk about Count Out of the Bag 2.5 and 2.6.
I was going to badger everyone with badge-related wordplay, but I could only think of a couple of puns. It would have been a bad joke anyway, so I think we'll pass.
Yeah, let's move on from that. Today, we are lucky enough to have a local celebrity joining us. I'd like to welcome Malia onto our podcast.
Yay!
Whoa.
Hello!
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is so exciting.
It does actually kind of feel like having a celebrity on it, just because you were... I listened to as much of Pale in comparison, or as was out back when I moved. So, many hours of your voice coming out of the car.
Cool.
Yeah, it was it was good.
It's still funny that people that I like, strangers, listen to me talk about stuff. I guess that's why you make a podcast, is so that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and now even more strangers are.
Yeah. Hello, Twig readers.
I'm sure I feel like the Venn diagram for Twig listeners and Pact is more of a smaller circle within the bigger circle of the Pact one.
Yes, probably.
We're working to, punch that out, make it all bigger.
Yeah, let's do that. So I know, Malia, you mentioned that you had started reading Twig when we started our podcast, but you have since zoomed on far ahead of us. Have you finished it, or where are you?
I haven't finished it yet. I read it in spurts. But I've started arc 7.
Okay.
I realized that I didn't want to get too far ahead because I've already have forgotten details about arc 3 and arc 4 and all of that, and so it's nice listening to the episodes and remembering what y'all are talking about, and rereading is something that I could totally do. But I haven't.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
Well, there is a lot to read.
Yes. So I'm excited to not spoil anything this episode.
So yeah, spoiler warnings for future chapter of Twig.
Through 7.4.
That is something I would actually cut.
No, I'll be good.
I do go out of my way to have overly detailed chapter summaries, just for people who don't remember what happened. Because
I do feel like a good number of people are a good number. I don't actually know what our listening numbers are at all. Dante looks at that. But I feel like a lot of people have read Twig in the past and are not necessarily going back to it and just listening.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a bad memory. I usually need to read something twice before I even remember what it was about. So, if I was listening to this and I had read Twig when Twig had first come out, I would not remember anything. I would be like, I have no clue what you're talking about. Who are all these people? So,
yeah.
Well,
I had to do that for Pact when I started listening to you. And I tried to do for a while, read the chapter and then listen to your... And then I just found myself, I'm like 5 or 6 chapters ahead of where you guys are, just because it's like, let me just keep going. We keep going. And then...
Yeah, Pact in particular is like popcorn.
Oh, yeah. It just keeps rolling down a hill faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I've always been following the audiobook of all of the things. And Speed Chuck made the very infuriating decision to go on a hiatus right after one of the biggest cliffhangers in early Pact.
So arc 7?
It was...
Because that's like the big one.
No, it wasn't one of the big ones, but it was...
Spoilers for Pact coming up.
Spoilers for Pact coming. It was right after Blake got arrested for the murder of Evan.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
How long was that?
I don't remember when exactly that was, but yeah.
How long of a hiatus was it?
I think it was like 6 months or something.
Oof.
And he was like, by the way, I'm going on hiatus. I'm like, screw this. And I just read the rest of it.
Yeah. I'm I'm very excited to finish. But
Well, you're
You're almost done.
there. You're
so
basically
close.
there.
Yeah, definitely less than 10 chapters. I think it's like a little more than 5, but
2-3 more episodes, say.
Have you decided what you're doing afterwards?
Probably Poke. I don't know if we cover that in an episode or what. I don't know how long that is. And then
It's like 4 chapters, 5 chapters, something like that.
Okay.
I think.
So 1 or 2 episodes, I guess.
4, I
and
think,
then yeah, and I'm not sure. I mentioned it to Jenny, and she was like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Cool." There's a possibility that I mean, I think Wildbow usually takes a break after,
Mhm.
and there's a possibility that he would start another Otherverse related story or something, and we could cover that. But like, I don't like we. I don't think could cover something live consistently. So
Yeah.
I don't know what we'd do, but
Well, you do have to finish your mom's read through.
I've been badgering her. Every once in a while she'll be like, "I read today. Who's this person?" I'll be like, "Yeah, okay." She got really hung up with the textbooks. That was the thing that really, really made her struggle. The extra materials.
Fun fact, I skipped those.
What?
I skipped them, waited for the audiobook of them to come out, and read them that way.
So you have consumed them.
I have consumed them, but I haven't read 100 Years Lost yet.
Right.
Because
are you waiting for that one? Or?
I cannot get through these textbooky type things, and if your mom can't either, then tell her she can skip them. It's okay.
Well, yeah, I was just kind of like, yeah, it's fine. Like, don't beat yourself up, Mom. Like, this should be fine.
Yeah.
So you say, if Wildbow starts another Otherverse series, that would be what you'd want to do? What if he does, I don't know, like Void, or I don't know what the other options
Yes,
were?
you must announce your future plans right now.
The idea of Jenny and me being the like definitive voice on Wildbow work in the podcasting sphere for like the hot new topic is horrifying.
What are you talking about? That would be the best thing ever.
It'd be fun. Sorry, Elliot, Ruben.
As someone who is not responsible for the creation of it, that sounds like the best thing ever.
It'd be fun.
It would be.
But yeah, I'm not sure. My husband and I have also talked about starting some podcast someday, but we haven't ever actually sat down to do it. I want him to do a bird podcast with his other bird friend. Yeah. I like birds a lot, but it would just
There's
be
a limit?
like, okay, cool. That's
well, you can have the same dynamic with that you have with Jenny, where it's like he's read all the stuff about birds, you haven't, and
there's a fire sparrow, and
we get together and just talk about the next Wikipedia entry on some bird. Yeah, okay.
Definitely a demon under that house.
Yep. I am excited to reach the end of the podcast and hear what the community's reactions have been to some of my stuff.
It'd be kind of, I mean, we are, I guess, supposed to be talking about Twig, but I was going to say, it'd be kind of cool if you were to do like a sort of retrospective, kind of look at the old predictions you've made and see where they are, and like try to get back, I guess, into the headspace you were at those like initial chapters.
Yeah. We haven't confirmed if or what we're doing for All Packed Up 2, All Paled Up Beyond the Pale, but we want to help, and we have sort of offered, like, if y'all need a nap for an hour or two, like, we can go, like,
sounds
vamp.
ridiculous.
If we can figure out how live streaming or whatever actually works. And so I'm not sure if we'd try to do something like on that, or if we'd dedicate an episode to it, but I do want to go and look back and be like, yeah, did I pick up on anything?
Put it all in Wildbow. How good was he at foreshadowing what was happening?
Just the idea of web serials, like, he can't, I mean, yeah, that he writes in order. He doesn't get to go back and be like,
Yeah.
sprinkle, sprinkle.
Oh, this might be no. This is not going to be a pale spoiler, but you might cut this. I was I was reading Poppy's live read, in Jay's server.
Poppy, if you're listening to this, go away.
Yeah, and Poppy was pulling out some stuff and predicting stuff that's like happening in the latest chapter, and
Whoa.
they're somewhere in pre Blue Heron arc.
Wow.
Like it's wow. There's yeah. I'm not actually gonna go into detail because that's not where we are, I guess. But
Yeah,
it's
I
just
think we're gonna
there's
have to
some.
go and
It's just it's wild the fact that Wildbow's dropping hints that early, especially for something. Or I guess maybe it makes more sense because it was meant to be a shorter work.
Mm.
Like I don't know.
I always think it's funny, like Wildbow, whenever the subject of like gardening style authors versus architect style authors, and Wildbow is like, I see myself more of a gardener, and all the fandom is like, what?
It's a really nicely structured high-rise garden.
Yes.
And he plants everything like conceivably useful
Mm-hmm.
that he can pick back up. Yeah,
Yeah.
nah. In thinking about other podcasts to do things on, not a lot of things appeal to me in the same way as Wildbow's works, just in terms of like I started reading The Wandering Inn. People were talking about it on the Discord, and so
Ooh.
finally I started reading it, and it's really good and fun and has a lot of like neat characters and neat mechanics, but it doesn't have quite like I'm not sure what I would say about it other than this was really cool and this was really fun and like I think it's kind of going to go this way and we're going to have this big battle at the end of this book volume, however she sort of breaks them up, but it's not the paths. I don't know, they're just like
Yeah.
he has so much like meat and depth
Mm-hmm.
to like dig through.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Speaking of meat and digging through it,
Are you trying to bring us back on topic?
I am.
Because I was going to ask how The Wandering Inn is.
We'll come back to it at the end, and I'll yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So do either of you? I mean, I'm assuming you went back and reread these chapters, Malia.
I
You
did
did.
do that.
Okay, good. Do you have any thoughts about them, both of you?
I think we should get badges.
We don't need no stinking badges. I mean, it's just I like these based on the first arc of Twig, it was like we were kind of setting up the conflict of, oh, here's this like thing we have to look into, and it like builds and has some little twists and turns and comes to this like big crescendo, and then like we resolve that bad guy. So like assuming that this arc is following that same pattern, although it might not be, we're in the fun like building phase where like we know Reverend Mauer is doing some shit and we're gonna go to the church and like figure something out. And I really I tend to like the beginnings of stories, like laying the foundation for things. And this is a fun chapter where like, yeah, we get the or 2 chapters, we get the badges. We get like Sai putting together this plan and you're trying to figure it out. Like, you need adults? What? Okay. And just like this, I love this part of a story. So it's fun.
Where you get to sort of think about the resolution before the author tells you what it actually is, and
yeah, and
this
just
is the
like
part where you can make the
talking.
predictions.
Yes.
make an ending before the author does,
and then find out you were completely wrong.
Always.
Yep.
But their little bickering and conversations and all the little character moments. Jamie beating up Sai, it's golden.
Yeah. And just I don't remember if it was in this chapter, if it was the previous chapter, just this Sai insisting that Jamie is the one that he could probably beat up and being shown he's wrong immediately.
Yep. Shall we dive into the chapter summaries?
Sure.
All right. Who wants to start?
Previously on Twig, the Lambs were investigating the release of a monster which they codenamed Whiskers. They discovered that it was orchestrated by a Reverend Mauer in order to turn the population of Radom against the Academy.
In Cat Out of the Bag 2.5, the lambs go back to the academy to report to Hale about Mauer. On the way, Sai obsesses about getting a nice, shiny, sheriffy badge that makes people do whatever he says. They find Hale with the people in charge of the academy, aka the professors running the whole affair, and they report on the situation to Hale and the academy leadership. Sai annoys everyone by arguing with the administration, but in the end, the administration agree to allow the lambs to handle the issue. Sai announces that he needs 2 things: badges and an adult.
In Cat Out of the Bag at 2.6, Gordon is annoyed and he chastises Sai for jeopardizing their station in the academy. And then Hale is annoyed and he chastises Sai for jeopardizing their station in the academy. But it's Sai and he has a good point, so Hale decides to go along with his plan for now. And he finds them adults. He assigns Cecil and Lacey to go with them. Cecil with the promise.
Is that how you pronounce it? I've always pronounced it Cecil in
Is
my
it
head.
Cecil?
I don't know, but Cecil sounds... I have no idea. Anyway.
Cecil.
Cecil.
I also pronounce it Cecil, but if we want to call it Cecil, that's fine too.
I wonder... I have no idea. I've never met a Cecil in real life.
I've only met a francophone Cecil, and
that doesn't count.
It was pronounced Cecil, so...
Oh, I like that better. But Hale secures his cooperation with the promise of a lab, and I don't know, Lacey's just like long suffering and does this for reasons. But with their help of their adults, they go back to the church, and they form their plans en route. But their plans go somewhat awry because the moment they walk in, Mauer recognizes Mary.
Yeah.
Yay!
Dum dum dum.
She's a real person. We didn't expect this to bite us in the butt so soon.
Yeah, it's pretty much immediately.
It's like, oh yeah, you are a clone of a real person. Awkward.
It's a clone of a dead child.
Uh-huh.
Well, she might not be dead, right?
Yeah, that's true. She just got sold to some mad engineers, scientists, rebels, so...
It's awful.
Yes.
It'd be awkward if the person they sold it to was Reverend Mauer.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Assuming, there's this conspiracy with all these parts working together, that's, in theory, certainly plausible.
I feel like he wouldn't react the way he did.
No, probably not, but still. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't put this down in the notes because I kind of just thought of it before. But I thought it was interesting that this chapter these 2 chapters is basically they walk to the academy from the church, then they walk back to the church. It's like the structure of this is like the structure of these chapters is very much we just did this and then we're going to go right back to where we were.
And the chapter before this was them walking to the church.
Yeah.
And the chapter before that, I think, was them walking to the academy.
They're getting their steps in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the first thing to discuss about the plot is badges. Badges. Mushroom, badges.
You dated yourself there so hard.
Wait, I haven't done that already, like, a dozen times over. Yes. The description for chapter 2.6 in the audiobook is simply that one word.
Oh.
Badges.
Okay.
Yes.
Sai has a point. Like, this is a great idea.
Absolutely.
No notes.
It absolutely makes sense to anybody who doesn't actually know Sai.
I mean,
like, they're very well articulated, cogent points, but Sai would absolutely abuse and exploit and do whatever he wants to with them.
So
Sai will abuse and do whatever he wants with anything. It doesn't matter if he has badges or not.
Well, I'm wondering, does something like this exist already? Like, do the I mean, it was a bunch of random students blocking the gates, right? Or like
Yeah.
like, how will people recognize this thing? Like, does something like this already exist? Is he going to get like a police badge or
I
like?
don't know. I guess that's a good point because I mean they talk about how people recognize the professors by the color of their coat and like they're all ranked
Mhm.
by coat color, not by like ID badges or anything. So yeah, I don't know if Sai wants to have like a letter of marque signed by Hale and says I can do what I want,
Mhm.
or
And that's what their temporary badges are, I
basically
think.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to a sandwich earlier.
Okay.
They work in the security pass industry. And I was like, what are your thoughts on this whole badge situation? And they're like, yeah, I think it would be interesting to know, like, how would you make sure, like, the guards know that the badge is legitimate, that, it would be so easy to forge it or to just, like, steal it or whatever.
Okay, but counterpoint, this is the academy. The badges are likely some horrific tick that
You're right,
like
lodged in beneath their skin or something.
yeah, exactly.
An RFID tag.
Yeah. But
I
you
don't-
also, like, again, this is the academy. Like, they could probably just grow a fake one and be like, there, look, I'm authorized now.
Mm.
Yeah, but
So,
only the academy can, because obviously all the knowledge is reserved and kept safe in the academy. Nobody would sell
because
that.
nobody has ever stolen a book from the academy ever before.
Just ask Lillian.
Just
Correct.
yeah. So we'll see what these come up with, but like, yes, if they get badges permanently, Sai will definitely abuse them. But I think that there's also that good point that a lot of other people could abuse them too, and probably they will be.
And there's definitely a use to them.
Yeah, it seems like Dog and Catcher are, presumably you could tell who they were by looking at them, whereas these are like children. And so
Yeah.
like I can totally see why people would just be like, "You're a child, why are you talking to me?" But also like Sai, like
like Cecil did.
yes. And so they in certain situations would need a way to be able to be like, "No, I'm serious. For real."
Like I actually have authority.
Yes. Like we don't need to argue about this right now. I need to get into this place.
Yeah.
I'm
'Cause they
excited for efficiency.
Yeah. They did lose quite a bit of time talking to what's his name, Vernon Coates. Is that
Vernon
his
something
name?
or other.
Yeah,
I have it written down here.
Cornett, Vernon Cornett. Yeah, and it's time absolutely wasted that presumably Whiskers is slowly mulching a peasant.
A peasant? This is
City
random.
folk.
This is the greatest city in the Crown States.
Naming it Whiskers gives it way too much pathos or whatever that word is. Like I just love it. I'm like, oh,
The cutie pie.
you're so cute.
Yeah, someone posted. I don't know if we could try to find it and put it in the show description or show notes. Someone posted a picture of fan art of Whiskers, and it's not at all what I was picturing, and it was far cuter than I was picturing, despite having no face and no eyes to empathize with. I
I mean, its
guess
name is Whiskers.
Love.
Why were you expecting something less cute?
because the description of it is basically an armored hairy slug.
Yeah, that's adorable.
It sounds like a tribble.
That is true. Which also sounds like an Academy project gone wrong.
Yes, it really does. Also would have a similar effect of, put it in there and it denies the space to people who might want to use it.
Yeah, that is true. And consumes all the food. And yeah, so Tribble as an Academy project for the war is a go.
Whiskers as a tribble.
Confirmed.
I love how
sorry,
all
go
of
ahead.
these bits of our notes here is this. We'll talk about this later. We'll talk about this later too.
Yeah. So I was like kind of going through the story, being like, all right, what are the things that happen in this plot that we should talk about? Well, first they talk about the group dynamics. Well, we're going to talk about that later when we talk about the group and their dynamics. We have this argument with Vernon. Well, we're going to talk about Vernon later too, because we have this whole character section, and this whole thing is just like we talk about these characters, and then we talk about these characters, and then we talk about these characters.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Fair enough.
so yeah. So the first thing we see is they're all having a discussion about the characters. So we're going to talk about that later. The second thing we do is we argue with Vernon, who is a new character. So we're going to talk about him later. But I did want to point out that I think that Vernon actually handled that argument about as well as can be expected. Like, it was very annoying, but
a bunch of creepy-ish children show up at the door and say, "I need to go inside." Like, no, you don't.
Yeah, that's a reasonable response.
Yeah, and even we're sort of going to talk about this, I think, later, but like anybody can say, "I'm this so-and-so's daughter," and this person knows. They talk about how Ibat, is that his name, is super famous. You can't just, if you had a badge, then yeah, you could show that is actually your last name, but otherwise, just name-dropping people should not be able to get you into the academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, go ahead.
I was thinking, like, Helen should be like, "I'm Professor Abit's daughter," and then just like dislocate all of her joints or something. Like to me, I'm like, that's badge enough. Come on in.
Yeah, that's valid. But...
Yeah. I mean, that's what she was saying. She's like, it's like, go home. This is my home. I'm an Ibit. No. This is my home. I'm a monster. Like,
yeah, it might only work for Helen, but it.
Well, I'm sure that works as well as a distraction Mary had planned. Everybody else could sneak in as Helen is putting herself back together.
Oh yes, now we've got a new idea of Helen where she has detachable limbs and just like
who knows?
Yeah. So after that, they finally get in and they argue with the professors, who also are new characters, and we're going to talk about them later. But I think this discussion is worth talking about here as well. I thought it was very interesting that, like, we keep pointing out, like, the Lambs are a failed project, and all these other characters are failed projects, and the Academy seems to love its failed projects. But it becomes pretty clear here that the Academy doesn't love them. They have a lot of them, apparently, but they really do not care very much for the Lambs.
No, but I kind of feel it's we'll use them as tools, but we don't want to be reminded of our failures, and don't want to talk to our experiments. It's weird if they're going to make me try to feel empathy and care about them.
Well, it's not even so much that they don't like them, but they're putting up with them. It's more just like they are a failure. They are still a failure.
Use them up until they're gone.
When are they going to stop being a failure? Hail.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's. I don't know a ton about like academia and scientific research, but it feels like there's something interesting here in terms of like they didn't meet the like lofty standards that you had said that they were going to meet in order to like get the funding and permission to do the research. But like this is still a interesting and important and necessary step to like more research, but instead of embracing that, it's like frowned upon, but then they have to like make themselves as good and relevant as they can, even though like it's just something about like it's
proving
unrealistic to expect things to work out perfectly, but also there are limited resources, and so I guess you want to like put those toward the things that are going to be the most successful. I find it strange that like we're introduced to these kids and they take down a like horrifying cat demon monster and a mad scientist, but they're failures. Like it's like, oh, they seemed pretty effective.
Yeah.
But it's not a fun, like it's not a fun story to. I mean, unless it's a Fall from Grace story, I guess. But to just be like the Lambs are incredible and everybody loves them and thinks they're great isn't quite as fun as like the Lambs must prove that they should exist.
Yeah, but you bring up a good point about like this kind of not feeling like, all these people who are in charge of the academy should, in theory, be dedicated to the science and the development of it all. But it felt more like a bunch of executives at a
Mm.
company talking about lines that didn't work out, and why are we still talking about this? That was a failure. Let's move on to something else that won't be a failure that we can sell and make money on.
Mhm.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And I get the impression that academics is also more business-like than people
Absolutely,
imagine. So
the
I'm sure they have similar
the
discussions
platonic
there.
ideal of academia and like the platonic ideal of a business meeting. I feel like this is far closer to the business meeting side than academics. I don't know. I am not in academics, so I can't say, but
Sure.
I am sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, everybody's laughing about the lambs behind their back.
Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't seem like the rest of the failed projects were. They've got friends.
I guess. I wonder if all the other secret projects get trash talked by the Academy as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, the vibe I got of that meeting is very it I mean, I guess because it is an archetype, but it did feel like the pale spoiler Nicolette meeting or not meeting, but like Nicolette at that first time we are introduced to Alexander's apprentices.
Mhm.
That same kind of sort of underhandedness and snark and contempt.
Mm,
Like a competition structure where one person holds all the power and everyone else is vying for,
Yeah.
like, survival almost, and they have to, like, get into that one person's good
Hmm.
graces.
It's crabs in a bucket.
yeah, that's interesting. I think now I kind of want to read more of the story behind these
Different projects.
professors and their
Mhm.
drama as they vie for power. I wonder if we'll see more of that. Because it's the sort of thing we could very well see more of, but also it could be
Yeah.
something we don't see more of. And
Those are the binary, the two choices.
yes,
But no, I get your point. Yeah, I get what you mean. It is interesting to see, and each one of them, I'm sure, has as much of a fully realized story behind them as Sai's interactions with Hale, and
yeah. And
um,
Hale's there, and he's got his failed project, and I
yeah.
wonder what all of their other projects are that makes them so much better than his.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, he's clearly still part of the club.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mean, Ibit isn't in that room with them, so those are not all of the important professors.
well, didn't they say that Ibit just doesn't care about the politics of it, and he's powerful/good enough that he doesn't need to?
I think so. Maybe
I,
that's something they said in the book, and maybe that's something that we decided was true based on our
maybe.
interpretation. I don't
This
remember.
this also wasn't, like, an official meeting or whatever, right? They're just, like, sitting around in a faculty lounge, like, drinking wine or something?
That's true. Some of them had like some meal in front of them. Yeah, you're right. It's not like a meeting. It's just a
It's, like, where they were when the lamps came back.
yeah. That's a good point. It's not formal.
Mhm.
Maybe Ibit would be
Yep.
there. Were
Well, back to the drawing board. We have to reinterpret this whole scene. I mean, it does become a pretty formal meeting
Mhm.
instantly when they arrive. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And Sai, of course, makes himself as likable as he is able to.
Yeah.
I did get the feeling that, like that messenger guy walks in halfway through the argument and is like, "Oh,
Apparently
there's
is
been 3
Cecil.
more deaths and whatever." And I really got the impression that that kind of saved the lambs' bacon, because if he hadn't come in with that, then they would have just been like, "No, go home. We're gonna nuke the church from orbit and
I buy that.
call it a day."
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely buy that.
So the lambs are pretty lucky in
Yeah,
this respect.
they owe Cecil. And yeah, you also brought up that you felt that Hale was significantly less angry than you expected.
Ah, yes, because that's the next chapter. And in the next chapter, everyone is yelling at Sai because he's being a pill and
Hmm.
they've just had enough. This is really everyone else's fault, because Gordon just said that the entire point of the group dynamic is to prevent Sai from being
A
what
problem?
do they say? From going overboard? From becoming unbearable. So Sai is being unbearable here. So clearly everyone else is failing in their job as part of the group.
I did like that it felt like Hale put on his dad, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed voice there.
It's true. I was expecting him to be
What?
furious, and he was actually just disappointed, like a...
It's like, come on, Sai. Like, we've had this conversation before.
Please don't. Just like, don't embarrass me and interrupt and berate like the most important members of our faculty.
Yeah.
I wonder if the reason Hale isn't as mad as he probably should have been is because Sai just does this all the time. It's like...
Yeah.
It's like, why is it that every time I sit down to lunch with Professor Briggs, you come in and argue with him? It makes me look bad. Poor Hale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
So
of something
go ahead.
completely off topic.
Go
I just
for it.
realized
Is it still Twig related or
it's
completely?
it's related to this episode that we. So I think the reason why I said Cecil is because that I think there's a director, Cecil B. DeMille, who was famous for having like really, really big battle sequences, like huge, like he'd get like hundreds of extras to like reenact these battles in these movies or something. And I've heard it pronounced Cecil B. DeMille, I believe, in Blazing Saddles, which also has the really great "We don't need no stinking badges" line, and those flew through my mind
There's that
just
connection
now.
there.
Yeah, so this episode is very Blazing Saddles.
Uh-huh.
These chapters.
We should have watched that before we...
He did the 10 Commandments. Okay, yeah, I know this. I didn't recognize the name, but I've seen at least one of these movies from like the 1920s and 30s.
I want to remember what the... Right, I must have killed more people than Cecil B. DeMille, because he'd have those insane...
Giant.
Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe Gene Wilder was wrong.
Because
is it Basil or Basil, that name?
I would say Basil.
this guy's name is Basil.
But is it Basil or Basil?
Such a
So
cutie.
Basil is the name of the person, and Basil is the name of the plant. But this guy's named after the plant, so his name is Basil and not Basil.
The kitty. Why is the
All of you listening at home, Dante is holding a cat up in front of the camera.
kitty?
Yes, this is a foster cat. His name is Basil, and he is very cute. And he bit me on the thumb just a few minutes ago,
Oh,
but I still love him.
He is dark as the void.
Mhm.
Like,
Yes.
I can't see a
Ow!
face. It's just...
Hey, none of that.
Sorry to laugh there. But
He's just a baby kitten, so he doesn't know better.
how old is he?
He's 3 months old, I think.
Oh, wow,
No,
very
he
tiny.
must be older than that by now. I don't know. He's quite young. He doesn't know better.
Mm-hmm. He's got all these teeth and claws, and he doesn't know what to do with them.
Yep.
All right.
So after all of this character exposition that we have spent all this time talking about, despite the fact that we're going to talk about it all later, we finally get to the plan.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which we still don't actually know what the plan is.
It's like, we're gonna go in, and we have adults, so it's not as weird. And
Yes.
then we will be in.
Yeah.
I also thought it was funny that Sai starts out being like, this is what we need, this is what we're gonna do, like, I know what we're doing. And then when they get there, he's like, Jamie's like, do you have an idea? And he's like, I think I have an idea. It's like, Sai, you don't have an idea. You're just winging it. He just wings it all the time.
And
Go ahead.
And just point out that he tells Gordon to trust him, and Gordon's like, no, what are you talking about?
Gordon's probably like, you're probably just going to like go up to Mauer and argue with him until he's really pissed off at you.
That's expecting Sai to do the same thing more than once, and I don't know if that's a winning bet.
He does the same thing all the time. He climbs buildings all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He overestimates himself all the time. I mean, we saw that whole thing where he was showing off to Mary his like ability to 4 things and all that, and Gordon just like said his lines for him.
That's true. Yeah.
Sai is so predictable that Gordon can just be Sai without Sai.
Sai seems a bit extraneous to the group now.
I did like Sai's description of what, like, so when he says he has an idea, but he just needs to figure out an angle, and he doesn't tell us what the plan is, but he does give us his mental state at the time, which is as follows. I'm thinking our shepherd is playing a game of chess. We're late to the game. Every piece of his is well positioned, all so he's untouchable. We'd be a lot better off if they hadn't waited before asking us to jump in. But haven't you ever been sitting at a chessboard thinking to yourself just how nice it would be if you could just take his turn for him, make the worst possible play, then watch them scramble to try to recover?
Mm-hmm.
To which the answer is, no, we've never thought that. What are you talking about? But apparently that's where his head is at, so presumably that's sort of the direction we're going.
Well, I mean, Sorry, go ahead, Malia.
I was going to say, it's interesting that, like, he's not playing Mauer in this scenario. He's, like, walking up to a table where Mauer is playing chess with someone else, and, like, Sai's goal is to, like, fuck up the game of chess and, like, make it so Mauer loses, but he's not playing Mauer in chess. And that's an interesting way to, like, if I was thinking of a chess metaphor, I would think, I am playing chess now.
Yes.
No, Sai is not playing chess.
Sai wishes he were playing chess.
No, that's a good point, and I guess that does tie into where he was, why he's asking, Lillian to pull out her random vials of poison and how much she needs, because any well-prepared Girl Scout has a vial of poisons, I guess. It's
Lillian as a Girl Scout is such an endearing image. The little like vest and her little satchel with all the I love her.
All little vials.
Mm-hmm.
Organized.
She would be a Girl Scout too.
Oh, she absolutely would be. She has her sash with the badges, dissection badge and
learned about Poisons Today badge. And
climbed a building badge.
Lillian is easily the most wholesome of the gang.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So Jamie has
Jamie exists,
yeah. Yeah. But I think taint is not the right word there, but I think his association with Sai kind of drags him down from that pedestal just a little bit. While he is pulling Sai up towards that pedestal.
Yes.
Whereas Lillian is just there, friendly, happy.
Lillian's association with the Academy also pulls her down a little bit.
No, but she seems to be, at least on some level, a true believer in like the ideas of it, I think. At least a little bit. She's
of the Academy, you mean?
Of the Academy, yeah. She seems to believe that like ultimately what they're doing is for the greater good of the population, of the world, and they're developing new things that are going to help.
She also just must be an incredibly ambitious child to put up with this situation.
That is true.
Like this is the thing that's allowing her to be here, and it's like she had to sneak into a building with the acid stuff. She has to go down into the bowel. She has to do all these things and follow these insane children. And I don't know, it's dedication.
Yeah.
And she enjoys it too.
Does she though?
Well, I mean, she complains more than the others do, but
so she's not born to it.
Yeah, that's true. Who wouldn't complain if they weren't born to that?
Absolutely. All right, so I'm not sure which of you put this next section here.
That was me. I don't know if
Okay.
this is the best time to talk about this, but it is sort of plot relevant. Um, and so at one point, um, Gordon mentions that like he doesn't want to lose this gig, presumably like the lambs need to keep their station in the academy.
Hmm.
Um, and so that made me think about like where is this, where is Twig going? Like when we're introduced to the idea of the academy and stuff at the beginning of arc 1, I was kind of like, oh, they're bad,
Hmm.
and like these are our protagonists, and they're gonna like somehow immediately like betray the academy and run off to the resistance. But at the end of arc 1, it's like the enemy is this dude who's kidnapped and maybe murdered a bunch of children and had them murder their sort of parents, and like is the antagonist and like is labeled enemy in the story. um and I mean, this is a world where a lot of people and institutions and stuff are bad and are doing bad things. But I guess like, is this a story where the lambs rebel and run away and betray the academy, or is this a story where they don't? Because like, yeah,
Hmm.
what happens if they lose this gig? Um, they have to have these appointments.
Yeah.
Um, is that like for their survival, or is that just to make them more useful? Like, there's all these kind of, yeah,
Questions.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see, I guess, any of those and any kind of combination of those happening also. I definitely can see a scenario where Sai is on the run and the rest of the lambs are tracking him down or hunting him down to bring him back.
It's so upsetting based on how protective he is of
Uh-huh. All of them. Yeah. But I can also see them being, in sort of Percy's situation in, as you said, Enemy, where they're being hunted by Dog and Catcher and
Mhm.
Gorger and all these people who are ostensibly who they are also. How many times have the lambs had to go after a failed project that they, in theory, might have known? I don't
And
know. I don't know if I'm quite answering or like following up on where you were going with your point, but
it seems like you're thinking that it is inevitable, or like that it is almost inevitable that at some point in the story the lambs and the academy will no longer be together. But like, is that true? Like, will they just like keep working for the academy, or is that like boring and not how stories work?
I
Um
assume that part, but I don't know. I mean,
I think
for
the
all
genre
l-
like
yeah,
insists that it must happen,
yeah,
and
but
so
I
it would
mean,
be very unexpected if it didn't.
how
But
beholden is Wildbow to the
yes,
like
exactly.
strictures of narrative, the expectations that we have?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about how the first, at least the first arc, and like a little bit so far the second arc, kind of feel like individual little stories. They're their own, dime store novel, and their own. And in theory, I guess we could have 16 short stories that sort of start and end in the same place with them going back to the academy, and then the next one they're given a new mission to go and catch something or resolve a mystery or solve something. Um, so yeah, I guess I don't know. That's a lot of words to say. I don't know, but
Yeah. I guess I feel like when I'm most successful at predicting things in a Wild Bow story, it's when I really like take 2 or 3 steps back and think like, okay, like not like what are these characters going to do and
mhm,
what are the like intricate things we're really thinking about in this scenario, but just like what needs to happen in a story. Um
yeah,
and it feels like, I think I agree, it feels like they're gonna, break from the academy and be at odds, but it doesn't feel like, "And they join up with Percy," is like,
no, that
right?
that doesn't
Yeah,
feel right either. They're all presented as the bad option.
yeah.
And I can see them being with, I don't know if this is officially the word that's come up, but like the resistance. Um, like I don't know if that's from the story or is that just us calling it that or
I, don't
I
remember.
think that's a different story that you're that.
There's one in space.
yeah.
Yes.
No, but like the rebellion, the what would you
The Rebel
call it?
Alliance.
Yeah.
The shadowy cabal. I
Oh,
don't know.
yeah, but like But yeah, I can see them being with the Resistance for a little while, but then assuming that we have protagonists that we're supposed to sort of root for,
Mhm.
they can't stay with the at best morally ambiguous, though I don't know if I want to call the people who have bought children morally ambiguous.
Right.
You know, I don't think yeah, that we know the Academy's bad and we know these people are bad. Where do the lambs fit into that structure if they are not beholden to one or of them?
And what's keeping the lambs with the Academy? Like, is it the appointments? Is it just, like, the funding? Is it that they don't know what else to do or that they kind of agree with it? Like, what
Hmm.
yeah,
It's
what's
their
the hook?
home, as Helen says.
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
probably each have their own reasons as well.
Mhm.
and I'd assume the lambs as a whole is a big part of that for each individual one of them.
Hmm.
Right. Each
Yeah.
other.
They would probably leave as a group or stay as a group
Hmm.
unless something big happens
Dramatic,
to shatter their dynamic.
like introducing a totally trustworthy new enemy that was, or I don't trust Mary. I am convinced.
Okay.
Um,
I thought you were saying in terms of like a Percy who or a Reverend Mauer who wasn't like horrible is what I thought you were saying, not just
oh yeah,
like
sure. There I
Mary.
can go with. I mean, maybe that's what Mary is. She's one of those who is not actually horrible, but she's in there and she's messing with their dynamics. Helen is clearly. I don't know about clearly actually, but Helen seems to like her. Um, and Sai's narration feels more and more genuinely caring of Mary
Uh-huh.
in a way
I
that
like how you've gone from like Sai is caring of Mary to just like abandoning the idea that that's even a consideration. It's just Sai's narrative suggests that he might be.
No, what I mean is that it feels earlier on. It felt like Sai was putting on, um, putting on an act or doing things specifically to make Mary feel comfortable,
Mhm.
and he kind of has dropped that in his internal narration, that self-justification of like, oh, I need to be doing this for this and that reason to keep Mary along. I think there's a particular line somewhere towards the end when Mary says something and he just thinks, oh, I'm so proud of you, Mary, without any kind of caveat to it, and that feels quick and suspicious to me.
Like she's like mind controlling him. She's probing
No,
into
but
his
just knowing how to,
Sai is
she
being genuine. This is
yeah,
terrible.
honestly, that's fair.
I feel like I'm being mocked here, but
Yes. No, we've got this sort of friendly dynamic where we mock each other and shove each other in the ribs when we.
yep.
Sai being genuine is a little bit suspicious, but the way he thinks about um the group in
Mhm.
these chapters from he really does seem to care
Yeah, and it
visibly.
absolutely, I would definitely buy that. That's what's happening. He's fully, incorporated Mary into his mental framework of the lambs and thinks of her the same way as he does the others. But
Hmm.
I guess my point there is that it feels quick in a way, and we see Mary deliberately working to befriend Lillian at least and Helen, because we haven't really seen her interacting with Gordon or Jamie all that much.
Hmm.
But like she makes efforts to get Helen to empathize with her, and Sai notes that Lillian is closer to Mary than he is. So, and
How
I
long
don't
has
know
it
if
been in story since Mary joined up?
I
Do we
believe
remember?
It
um
feels like it's been a few weeks, but this is a
I
Wild Ghost
think
story, so it was
so.
probably like a few hours.
Yeah. No, I think it was at the beginning of this chapter they talk about how Lillian and Mary have been at the academy together for like 2-3 weeks, and Sai has
Okay.
been not able to go and
Mhm.
Hang.
interact with Mary as he wanted to.
Yeah. So it hasn't been like months where Mary's
No.
been like chill and not activated as a sleeper agent or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been days. So yeah.
I guess we'll see.
I suppose.
Do we want to move on to world building?
Please.
Woohoo.
Please, finally get us out of this. All right. So, who started
Yeah,
with this first note?
I just thought that it was an it give words. The fact that what the head administrator Briggs cares about the most is Radham's image in the world vis-a-vis like rival academies, I thought is interesting because for a lot of what we've read so far, Radham Academy is the academy. So seeing that it has peers that could potentially look down on it and that it might lose some of its status was just interesting to learn.
Hmm.
And I guess tells us a little bit about the world itself that you know we kind of I kind of had this idea that Radham was the academy, and other might be schools might be other academies might be offshoots, or they're all offshoots of the same thing, because I got the vibe that they're producing the bulk of the war effort essentially. And that might just have been me reading too deeply into the text, and things that weren't necessarily said, and just making assumptions. But
Sure.
you have Ibat at this place who is reputed as building leviathans and whatnot, and then they produce all these stitched, and we have all these different things. It just felt like this is the main place, and learning that it's not is just interesting, I guess.
Hmm. I remember I had sort of imagined that all of the academies were just like offshoots of like the crown and the war effort and whatever.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And that, of course, wouldn't prevent them from
Jockeying for
having,
power,
yeah,
and yeah.
exactly, just like the professors
Hmm.
within the academy.
Yeah.
Um, but I kind of saw them as like sort of one big whole, like
Hmm.
the academies. Um, but yeah, they could be like genuine rivals. Like,
Yeah.
we've got to protect the image of Radham so that people don't start going to that competition.
I think part of it is that they don't refer to it in the or like Sai doesn't really refer to it much as like Radham or Radham Academy. It's the Academy, and so I
Hmm.
think especially at the beginning of the story, I almost thought it was like the only one or something. Like this is
Yeah.
where this
Hmm.
started and happened, and this is
Yeah.
just still where this is all happening. And it makes a lot more sense that other city, even if this was where this started, which I don't know
Mhm.
if we know that. Um, that other cities would like found these institutions. But yeah,
Mhm.
there's kind of a difference between uh this is one big university system versus like Oxfords and Cambridges or whatever,
Yeah.
like big institutions that aren't,
Affiliated.
yeah, but are also very powerful and
Hmm.
like influential, but yeah, not like under the same umbrella or whatever.
Yeah.
Although maybe the crown has enough authority over them that they sort of are. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like they're all separate, but
They
the
beholden to the crown.
regulations laid upon them make them more or less indistinguishable.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, and
That's very possible.
yeah. And we learn a bit more about Claret Hall in this
Hmm.
chapter, in that it is entirely grown, instead of most buildings being held together, stone held together by vines and trees. This is entirely shaped, and I just thought it was interesting that it's clearly like this ostentatious structure that is the academy being very conspicuous about its abilities and skills. It's the heart of the academy. It's the place that presumably visiting functionaries and officials and stuff go, and then the fact that they can point to this building and say, look, we didn't have to use anything that's not purely our own work here is
Hmm.
I just interesting. I also thought it was kind of weird that it's explicitly called out as a big wooden structure, and it has a fireplace inside it. That seems like dangerous design.
I mean, possibly. Could be fireproof wood.
Yeah, of course, but just that my
Yes.
initial like thought reaction to that was
Hmm.
like, wait a
Hmm.
second. This
Yep.
like, are you sure?
I guess I was thinking they had like a stone fireplace built into the wooden walls and that it's like alive enough that it's not gonna just.
Yeah, I'm sure that
Hmm.
that is something like that. It's just like I said, the first that first thought is like, what?
No, you're right. It's a bit
Yep.
discomforting.
Yeah. I also thought it was the aesthetic of the place is really interesting. In terms of color psychology, it's the heart of the of the academy. It's this place that's supposed to be um, this place that fosters learning and education and all that. And it's this deep red, which is a color that induces anxiety, especially if it's all around you. Which
Hmm.
I don't know if any of you have ever been anxious while trying to study. It does not work super well. And that's especially
What?
interesting.
Anxious while studying? That
Yeah,
never
I know.
happens.
But it's especially interesting that plants are naturally green, which is a color that is especially good for soothing and relaxing. So the deliberate choice to make their plants not, plant-like in a way that is an antithesis to like the core message or the core purpose of an academy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
hmm
I don't know that I
I
have
mean,
more to say about that, but
I'm pretty sure they didn't like color the plants red in
yes.
order to be anxiety inducing. Like, you know what would be really great is if we really stressed everyone out. So let's just color everything red and
I mean,
see
I
what
almost
happens.
see them being like only the best students should survive and thrive here, so we should only have like we shouldn't try to like comfort them or make it too easy because they must like like those pre-med classes or whatever where they're like trying to weed people out.
Mhm.
I could see them being like, let's make this a little uncomfortable for everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of wild that they do that. Though
Mhm.
like my cousin just got accepted to the medicine program uh and they have this like big long initiation weekend, which was this weekend, and I kind of assume it's, you know, bacchanalia of alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And then
Uh-huh.
at 9 a.m. on Monday they have a Zoom call that they all have to be in, and if they're not in the call they're kicked out of the program, which just seems
What the fuck?
yeah, yeah, like
Like
that's wild.
like, not even just the, like, hangovers happen or whatever, but just, like, things happen, and also
Yeah,
a Zoom call, like, not even,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
what if your internet's dead? Like, I don't
yeah.
know.
For all I know, it's part of like the initiation hazing that they tell them that just to like stress them out, and it's not actually that big of a deal. But just the fact that I don't know, yeah, it was. They mentioned that to me, and I was like, "What? What?
Like, do they know real life isn't actually like this?
Yeah, like that sounds like a shitty movie plot
Yeah.
point or
Mhm.
TV show plot point."
On the other hand, some organizations do weird, shitty things. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe they just, are not in a good program.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Yeah, it was just what you said about the pre med program and weeding people out there. Yeah, kind of made me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Definitely sounds like the sort of institution that would paint its student halls red.
yeah. And I can also see it because, we have this association with like that deep burgundy color being associated with elegance, and this is where,
Mhm.
you know, we see the professors, the people who are in charge are relaxing and drinking their burgundy colored wine, presumably, um, and eating their meals, and maybe that's part of it. That red velvet, that red satin is an elegant color.
Mhm.
Just
hmm I did kind of want to point out that, like, talking about how plants are normally green, which is a soothing and relaxing color. And it's like, based on the way, like, people and plants kind of evolved together, like, green is a soothing color because it's the color plants are.
yeah,
So
but I don't think
if
that changes the point of they
So if all the plants are
chose.
red, then maybe everybody will come to find. I mean, like presumably, it's only been 100 years that plants have been
Don't think
predominantly red.
don't think there's been time to select for a population that
Yes,
finds red
but
not
maybe
anxiety
the academy like modifies people to feel soothed by red stuff because I imagine Briggs being there like, oh, I love this red stuff. I've colored everything red, but I don't like being anxious, and I have an entire academy at my disposal. So let's just make it so that red is the soothing color now, and green is anxiety inducing to everyone.
Do we know why the plants are red?
No, but I
Okay.
can
Because red
guess.
is a cool color.
Well,
Because red's like blood, and we do biology and blood things.
if I think I remember someone commenting in one of the Reddit threads that it's probably because it's always overcast and the wavelength, green is absorbs the wavelengths really
Photosynthesis.
well. Science stuff. And then the overcast the red is absorbed, or the wavelengths. Sorry, I'm trying to articulate that thought better. But yeah, that it's just the red is because that those are the wavelengths that are not penetrating through the cloud cover or whatever. But it's to let the plants grow better in the constant cloud.
And they made it so it's always raining because everything's built out of plants? Is that why?
Wildbow wanted specific aesthetic, a specific color,
No, I'm
and
super into it.
Okay,
I just
so
wasn't sure.
I was watching a video recently about the color of plants because that's the sort of thing that I like to watch. Apparently, the bulk of the most common wavelength of light from the sun is in the green spectrum. So plants, being green, reflect and do not absorb
green.
the most common
That's
wavelength
weird.
from the sun, which feels very inefficient. So
maybe they went for a more efficient.
Maybe they went for red because they wanted to absorb more of the green because there's more green for it to absorb.
Isn't the reason that plants are green? Well, this is going to sound absolutely dumb as a question, but it's because of the chlorophyll. But when the chlorophyll starts to break down in fall, the leaves turn red because that's the innate color of the leaves themselves without the chlorophyll.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. So maybe the Academy just got rid of the chlorophyll for whatever reason?
Well, the point that this video was making is that these chemicals that turn light into energy, there's more than one of them. There are purple ones, there are black ones, there are whatever. And plants just kind of ended up with chlorophyll, which happens to be green. But they could have used any, other...
Sure.
Whatever. So...
Weird.
So we could be... we could have lived in a world where everything is... all the plants are purple and...
Yeah. So, I don't know if that means that these plants are using a different method that... a different...
Yeah. Maybe something more efficient.
Something other than chlorophyll. Or maybe it's masked by whatever is making them red. I don't know. I feel like we're probably
in the woods here.
Pun intended.
A little bit. In the weeds. Is that better? Yeah. I don't know.
I feel like we're expecting this to be a bit more hard science than it's actually intended to be.
But it's I mean, yeah, there's a wall, and I don't know a lot about biology, but it's fun to really try to dig into the logic of these people, even if the answer is it looks fucking cool and Wildbow thought it would be rad.
Yeah.
I think my most the theory that I believe most is that somebody at the Academy thought it would be rad. So.
Radom Academy.
Do we is this a thing just in Radom where it's always raining and everything's red, or is that everywhere? Do we know?
No, we don't know.
We know. I think we actually had that same question come up at some point. Yeah. So you are unoriginal. Thank you.
Rude.
But no, we don't know. I don't think.
Cool.
But maybe we'll find out. Or maybe we won't.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I was just going to say, so I went to the University of Texas, and so our colors were burnt orange and white. And when you walk around campus, you'll start to realize that all the buildings, I mean, I think that it's really pretty, but all the buildings are this orangey brick, and it's just and a lot of the roofs are orangey. It's everywhere. And so UT as an academy would totally make all the plants burnt orange.
It's just that taken to 11.
would not make them red. So
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
see other
So
academies.
maybe these
There
other
are
academies, like one city is all purple and one
Yeah.
city is all yellow.
And someone still has green plants,
Green.
and everybody else kind of looks down on them, like, "Oh, you didn't bother engineering your plants."
It'd be like Notre Dame. With slow green plants.
Alright, do you want to move on to our monster corner?
Monster Corner.
Is there a theme song for that?
Yes, the theme song is me whispering ominously into the microphone.
Alright, so yeah, we don't really get much else about new monsters except names.
Mm.
They bring up the lambs, dog and catcher, the hangman, gorger, foster, and the whelps, and then all the rest. And yeah, Foster and the Whelps feels like it could be a band name.
Oh.
But I was also thinking,
They all could be band names.
true.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, just interesting that the Whelps is a name, because to me that sounds like it could be another name for the lambs.
Mhm.
Just
Just
how
like-
many groups of creepy children does the Academy have running around?
But I bet they're, like, not at all creepy children. Like, I bet it's something, like, weirdly unrelated and ironic somehow.
Mhm.
I wonder, though, is Foster and the Whelps a reference to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends? Will we ever meet? Like, they're not grouped, but they are next to each other in this list, and
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
Um,
Have we seen the hangman
no,
brought
I
up
don't
before?
think so.
Because they mentioned the hangman as they were going to send the hangman to deal with Mauer. That was
If the
Bridget's
lambs
big
couldn't
idea.
handle it, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we might have heard the name before, but I think that's the first time he's been actually brought up.
hmm
So,
sounds lethal.
it's like, oh, there's a problem. We'll just send the hangman, and that'll be the end of it.
Which is interesting, because the previous times we've had that, like, oh, we'll just send someone to deal with it, it's been Gorger. It's
No,
like,
it was dog and
Mhm.
catcher.
Like, I guess it depends if it's inside or outside of the
Yeah,
academy.
yeah.
that's true, yeah.
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 If it's outside, it's
But those
always been
two, I
dog and
think,
catcher.
Yeah.
yeah,
If it's in the bowels, just drop Gorger in there and he'll take
deal
care
with
of.
it. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm very curious what these different failed projects all are.
Mhm.
I'd like to see them, hopefully not in an antagonistic way, before we actually get to, like, know who they are. But I mean,
Mhm.
Wild Mode does that a lot. Introduce us to characters, make them interesting and relatable, and then sets them against the protagonist, or does it
We
the other
fight.
way around,
Mhm.
introduces this horrifying antagonist and then makes them sympathetic on some level. Oh,
Yeah. And I mean, there's always going to be more that we don't
yeah,
know about. Like,
absolutely.
we might learn more about Foster and the Whelps and the Hangman, but then there'll just be like another handful that we
Mhm.
don't know about.
Mhm.
Yeah, since it seems everybody has failed projects at the Academy.
Does anyone have successful projects?
Ibat?
I mean,
Maybe?
if his
Maybe.
project is Helen, and Helen is.
Well, no, they said his projects were like big things, and making Helen was like a challenge that someone posed him. Like, can you do something
Right.
that is not?
That's true. He does have other projects. You're
Yeah,
right.
like it's that it sort of gave me that vibe of that I don't remember which fable it is, where like someone's trying to trick this evil sorcerer or giant or whatever, and it's like, oh, you can turn into all
Oh,
these
every
incredible
fable.
shapes, yeah, but can you do this tiny one? Turn into
Oh,
a
Puss in
mouse.
Boots. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And
If any of them has a successful project, it's probably Briggs.
Hmm.
I don't even know necessarily about that. The vibe I got from Briggs was like he's a canny operator, not like he doesn't necessarily have to be good at at the stuff, as long as he's good at the political wrangling.
Uh-huh.
Which is
The scientist who grew Claret Hall.
yeah, he did a good job.
Mhm.
Or sorry, I let my preconceptions there. He or she did a good job.
Or they. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes.
Though, have we seen any women as professors yet? I know Lacey and Lillian are at the academy as students, and in theory could rise up in the ranks. I just don't know if we've seen.
I don't think we've seen any who are named. We might have seen some in the hallways.
Yeah, I don't remember in particular, but
Okay.
I wonder if that's. I mean, were women let into the academies from the beginning, or was there
Yeah.
an interesting like movement of women being admitted and stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, Woolstone's
Well,
ratios are, you know, Wollstonecraft related at least. I mean, it's not
right.
specifically the same name, so
Is Woolstone a woman in this
we don't know.
universe? Right. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just saying the name
Yeah.
comes, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It would make sense if um Woolstone was a woman that like women would have been kind of included from the
Hmm.
beginning. But if they're sort of like making their
Only.
way more into it now, it would make sense if there weren't as many
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean,
women professors.
we're in the 20s, which, historically is one of the periods that women were able to sort of break into various fields that were more traditionally male dominated. So, if that's the case, it could be a parallel to our history.
Mhm. But also, like, this uh, fictional version of the world seems to be lagging behind a few decades in terms of stuff. Like, we've noted it's more Victorian than 20s and in
Yeah,
feels. So,
that is true.
yeah.
Yeah. Although if there was something like we know that there are big empires and they're sort of at war or something, and like World War One was a catalyst for
Yeah.
driving a lot of women into the workspace, and so
Hmm.
maybe that has happened. Or maybe
Yeah.
they just sort of recognized, you know, pragmatically, if women have ideas of how to
Then,
make fucked up shit, we should let them.
yeah. Though World War I did not have the ability to take the soldiers that have just died, stick a plug in them, and send them back.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe this war that they keep referencing is World War One, and it just hasn't ended yet.
Wow.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Um, anything else any of you want to bring up in terms of world building? Either of you?
I did think it was worth noting, um, as like a historical reference, that we got Woolstone's ratios referenced again,
Oh,
but there
sorry, I didn't.
wasn't any new info, so it's just like a name drop.
Well, and they
And
also like
so,
go, "Oh, it's just a theory," and it's like the theory around which your entire academic structure is based.
no,
It
no, no.
seems. Wasn't that it?
Uh, what happened was,
It
uh,
felt like he was saying it's a theory like how gravity is a theory. Like
Yeah.
but he was like saying like this thing is a theory, like Wollstone's ratios are a theory, as in
Hmm.
it's not a theory, it's basically fact.
Well, it's yeah.
mhm.
Yep.
But yeah, he was comparing it to the theory that he could beat Jamie in a fight,
Right.
Right.
which is not
He's
a theory in the same way that
Doesn't
no,
Woolstone's ratios are.
exactly.
speak well for Wollstone's ratios.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the characters
Sure.
because we delegated all of our discussion from before. So I guess we can have our actual conversation now. So this is where the podcast actually starts.
Hmm.
Yeah. So before we get into any of the individual characters, we did have that big discussion
Hmm.
about like the group dynamics and just like as a whole. We learned that they were originally intended to be have specific roles. Like we kind of at the beginning were like pegging each one as
Hmm.
a D&D role.
Well, we were
Mhm.
explicitly saying we have to be careful not to do that, and
Yes.
then we still ended
And
up
we did it
kind of
anyway
doing it. Yeah.
because it's more fun. But apparently that was the plan all along, was
Mhm.
to have them be pegged as a specific role. And then turns out that real life doesn't work that way. And they ended up being a bit more well-rounded than they anticipated. And things just
I
kind of carried on after that, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I do wonder how much of that is because they had to fill the roles of those missing members, and how much of that is because they are people and people don't slot into nice little niches like that.
I got the impression from the text that he was talking about the latter of those options, but
Yeah,
probably the first one would give part of that as well.
yeah. And I thought it was interesting that they used the word, or Sai used the word gestalt, and I was kind of curious where that, like, that the origins of that word, and I kind of went on a sort of a Wikipedia rabbit hole of research there. And apparently the word gestalt, in the way that we recognize it in English, comes from early 20th century psychology. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, Gestalt psychology. Uh, replaced structural psychology, which, and I just thought this was interesting because we know the lambs are brain projects designed, working with
Hmm.
psychology and presumably more meaty science, but there's elements of that.
Okay.
So, what was the dominant field of psychology? Again, not a psychologist, just as quick research while I was reading the chapter. Was structuralist, which was based on essentially three different points that uh, atomism, which is the view that all knowledge, even the most complex abstract ideas, are built from very simple constituent elements. Sensationalism is the view that the simplest constituent elements, or atoms of thought, are elementary sense impressions. And associationism, the view that the most complex ideas arise from the associations of all these ideas. So essentially, that you look at psychology from the ground up, whereas Gestalt psychologists believe that the most, I'm quoting this part directly from Wikipedia, that the most fruitful way to view psychological phenomena is organized, structured wholes. They argued that the psychological whole has priority and that the individual parts are defined by the structure of the whole rather than vice versa. So conscious experience must be considered globally by taking into account all the physical and mental aspects of the individual simultaneously, because the nature of the mind demands that each component be considered as part of a system of dynamic relationships.
Hmm.
And I just thought that was interesting in relation to the conversation that we kind of just had about why Psy and the rest of the lambs have grown beyond the roles that they are, is because they are part of this whole, and they are, they're not just all the little components that were presumably put into their brain to make who they are. They are, individuals, and you can't just look at them as the products of these little individual elements.
But also, like, the lambs is a whole, and so,
Yeah.
like, looking at Jamie as an individual constituent doesn't, and Sai as an individual
Mhm.
constituent, like, adding them all up together doesn't really equal the lambs, it's this bigger mesh.
Yeah.
Like, you need to look at each of them individually in the context of the others, and then, yeah, individually, it's not just Gordon's strength and charisma and
Yeah.
whatever, but it's cool.
Yeah. It was interesting to just read that and make that connection after seeing the word Gestalt, because yeah, it's not a word that it entered into English through this psychology here. It was a German word for shape, I think. I don't speak German. You do, Malia? I vaguely remember.
Sort of. I don't remember Gestalt.
Yeah. But yeah, so like the use of it is kind of anachronistic here, sorta. But
That's fine.
yeah,
And
of course.
it is interesting that it's a psychology thing and that
Yeah.
they're psychology projects. I think I
Mhm.
suppose, well, Psy is anyway.
Yeah, I guess we don't really
Um,
know where the others come from, but we know that he is.
yeah, but it does really sum up the essence of what the Lambs are, which is like
Hmm.
the as a whole, as a team, like the way they mesh together and become something like all the other projects. Well, Dog and Catcher not really, but all the other projects are just like a thing.
But they,
But this one, it's like
yeah, they're a group. They talk about
it's the
how
team. The team is the
they
thing.
talk about how yeah, Dog has been replaced more than once, and like the main element of that team is Catcher, and
You came up with that idea. They didn't say
no,
that.
are you sure?
Yes.
I I am fairly sure.
I think that it was something like they had said a dog instead of dog, and you said, I think that this might mean that there are other
Yeah,
dogs.
and yes, absolutely. And I still buy that. A dog implies there's more than one of them.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
but
valid.
that hasn't been confirmed.
Sure.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Or just, yeah, that's a valid interpretation.
Thank you. Um, and I also wanted to note, and I think this is a group part. This falls into the group dynamic thing. That Mary was like, "Oh, and to think Sai was the one I was most scared of at first." And Gordon answers, "Say what you will about Sai, he's very good at making people experience that dissonance between what they expect and what they get. But Sai is scary. He is dangerous and capable. You weren't wrong when you judged it back then. But now you're with us, a member of our group, which is very possibly the safest place you could be when dealing with Sylvester there. With us as a whole, even. Keep that in mind if you're ever entertaining the idea of stabbing us in the back." And I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Malia, just about Mary, about Sai and Mary sort of seeing and how they see the lambs as a whole, and Sai being very protective of the lambs.
Mhm. And what you were saying of how Mary is sus and not to be trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad Gordon brought it up because Sai certainly wasn't.
Yes. Now, I don't know if Sai actually thinks she's sus or just wants to put it on the table that it's technically possible that you could be sus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he's right that being a member of the group is the safest place to be if
Sai decides you're annoying.
Yes.
Because, yeah, if you're part of the group, he'll just, like, rib you and try to wrestle. And if you're not part of the group, he's going to do something.
He'll
Yeah.
throw a bowl at you at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Yeah. Thinking about, I think this is sort of group dynamics E. It's just Gordon and Sai fascinate me. I like their interactions a lot, and it feels like the original idea of the lambs had Gordon as like the Fred in the Mystery Inc. gang. like Gordon was like in charge. Because Gordon tends to take charge and direct things, and he tends to be like the face unless you need like a really cute girl to talk to someone. And the knowledge that Sai wasn't originally part kind of makes sense because Sai loves to be in control of everything.
Yeah.
And so like Gordon is much better at dealing with people a lot of the time. And so they kind of trade off and sometimes have like conflict over that leadership role. And you can see when you're forming a group that you would be like, okay, this is the one that's going to like talk to people most of the time and kind of dictate what's going on. And maybe sometimes the cute girl will step in to like charm the person, but Helen isn't going out there being like, we're doing this now. And like, are you going to betray us, Mary? Like, and if it's fun that Sai and Gordon, that Gordon can mimic what Sai is going to say, and that like they trade off, but they're so seemingly different on the outside. I don't know. They're fun.
No, I agree with you. That's if we take Sai's whole shaking bugs in a box thing, Sai's presence in the lambs is that shaking of the boxes.
Yeah, I think they had another part where they contrasted Sai and Gordon in this chapter, where Sai's like, I really like to knock things down and see what happens, and Gordon really likes to build things up and reinforce. It's like these, like they're very much like a good contrast for each other. They play off each other super well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't feel like Gordon is a character. Like, obviously, Sai thinks about the rest of the lambs, but I guess both of you said, they're kind of more clearly foils for each other than any of the rest of the lambs, but we don't really see Sai think about it or think about Gordon much. You know, he thinks about Jamie, he thinks about Lily, and he thinks about Mary, and then even Helen to some extent. And Gordon, I think, is at the bottom of the list of the lambs that he, actively spends mental effort on thinking about.
I think he thinks that he completely understands Gordon. He doesn't completely understand I think he thinks he completely understands Jamie, but he like loves Jamie and loves being around Jamie. And I guess the girls are more like mysteries where he thinks that he thinks he knows Gordon really well.
Yeah. Well, I do think he thinks he knows Helen, and I think Helen has grown beyond what his understanding of Helen, and he has not internalized that yet or recognized that she's not just play acting. Oh. Okay. Do you want to move on to talking about Sylvester specifically here?
Yay.
We kind of were already.
A little bit, but like
yeah. This is our normal podcast dynamic.
It's like
we put everything in its little category and then we talk about it anyway before.
I've been trying pretty hard not to like put it to jump ahead, but it's been hard.
It is hard because they're all interconnected.
It's all a big chapter. Yeah.
One thing that I thought is interesting about Sai in particular, when it comes to these roles, Gordon says he's meant to be the unpredictable one, bending and testing rules and altering the patterns we operate in. And that reminded me of our discussion in one of the first episodes we had about the project names, and how the wyvern in heraldry seems to represent all sorts of things. It could represent like plague, it could represent power, it could represent this, that, the other thing. And it's just kind of like a neat symbol that represents whatever you want it to represent, I guess, or something. And that's kind of what Psy ends up being. It's like it's not a specific thing that they're going for. It's like the wyvern, like Psy, is like whatever you need it to be.
Yeah. I'd also like to call out that, this quote says he's meant to be the unpredictable one, bending testing rules, etc. And as you pointed out earlier, Psy is very predictable, to at least the people who know him.
Well, yes.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting that Psy was so obsessive about the badges. I feel like there was this Psy's whole interaction from the moment he enters the academy to when they leave with Cecil or all that, um, sort of armchair psychology, I guess, going on right now. But it felt like he was acting more childish than he normally does. He seemed more cocky, more obsessive in ways, and I'm wondering if part of that is being around Hale kind of puts him into a more childish mental state because maybe Hale, has known him since he's been in a child, and people naturally tend to fall back into one's dynamics around people that you've known for a long time.
Okay. I mean, he wasn't with Hale when he was first being obsessed about the badges.
No, but they were going to Hale. Like they were explicitly going to be with him,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not like married to this idea, or
I can see that him being around Hale might make him more childish, but I didn't see this as seeming more childish than usual for
Really?
what we've seen of Psy.
That's interesting because
I felt like this was very on brand for what we've seen of Sylvester.
I definitely felt the opposite. I felt this stood out for a reason that I can't necessarily put my finger on. And I guess I was trying to parse that. So I don't
Okay.
really know that I have a reason or an argument behind this. It's just like this stood out as being sort of out of character for Psy, or not out of character necessarily, but kind of on like the far end of Psy's normal characterization.
Okay.
I wonder if, like, maybe part of it is he's a bit, like, ADHD or whatever, he bounces around a lot, and so him being fixated on this, which is a, like, ADHD
Yeah,
characteristic, but he is really fixated on these badges.
absolutely.
And so maybe that is,
Like,
yeah.
to a detriment.
I mean, I'm pro badges. I genuinely think they should have them.
Yeah, but there's a time and place to demand this badge.
And manner.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Maybe not after you've been badgering the head of the academy for
Mhm.
however long. Yep. I did think it occurred to me that Psy is really frustrated with being held back by bureaucracy and all the rules getting in the way of what he needs to get done, and that seemed very reminiscent of another Wild Bow protagonist that we all know and love, who famously refused to be part of the
Bureaucracy.
the bureaucracy and work outside the structures to get things done.
Yep, we are absolutely talking about Blake here. Though I do feel it's kind of is Blake. Sometimes, Blake does not want to be like. I know that's not what you're.
Restraint.
Yeah, no, that's not the one that you're referring to. But
Yes.
well, it's connective tissue between these first three Wild Bow works, I guess.
Yeah, I think that there is a theme Wildbow likes to explore is the tension between bureaucracy and structures holding back a person from being able to, like, do the things that they believe are right versus, like, what happens when that person is wrong.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, we're with Psy, we're very close in his head. I know that Psy is full of shit a lot of times, but for me, it's hard to determine exactly when. Part of
Yeah.
what I've liked about y'all's podcast is like you're going slower and you're more deliberate about it than I am as a casual reader, and so you're picking out things that Sai is thinking and saying to himself and identifying like, oh, that's BS, that's whatever. Because normally when I'm in a story, I'm just like, this person is saying it and therefore it must be true, which
Mhm.
is like not usually how Wild Vote protagonists in particular work. But
Yeah.
it's like I'm cheering on Sylvester and I want
Mhm.
him to
Mhm.
succeed. But what happens when, and like the badges and
Yeah.
the bullshit and all these things like are getting in the way of Sylvester being able to fix the world. But what happens when Sylvester is wrong
Yeah.
about the world,
Yep.
like Blake and Taylor and
Yeah.
various other Wild Boy
Yeah.
protagonists?
Mhm.
Fun.
Mhm.
Well, it's hard to, I guess, internalize the fact that the narrator, especially a first person narrator, is either wrong or lying to you as the reader.
Mhm.
You assume that you're getting an impartial truth. And I think that's, especially Worm, I think, is something that a lot of people have struggled with. The fact that Taylor is very unreliable as a narrator and, justifies to herself so much of what she does. And if you take half a second to actually think about it, it's clear that a lot of it is self justification to get, she's rationalizing in a way, same way that Sai kind of does,
Mhm.
what she has already done to make herself feel like she's done the right thing.
And
I'm trying to decide if that needs a worm spoiler tag or
I
not.
don't think so, because not calling out anything explicit, just
Mhm. Yeah, just like a character tendency that's with
yeah,
her from the beginning.
yeah,
I think Wild Boat is really, really good at inhabiting that character in that space in
hmm
a way
Mhm.
because like Sai and Taylor and Blake and other Wild Boat protagonists are deceiving themselves
yeah,
and like they're buying it and like I'm buying it. Like
absolutely,
Yeah.
the Wheel of Time, I love reading Matt Cawthon's perspectives because they're just so funny and wild but it's really easy to pick out when he's like, oh, who taught that little boy to like flirt with that woman that way? Like that's ridiculous. I need to chastise my men about that. And it's like, you did, you dumbass, right? Like, and it's very obvious in the moment that that's what's happening. And maybe it's because Robert Jordan has so many different perspectives going on all the time that I know Matt inside and outside of his head, whereas
right,
I don't know Sai outside of his head.
Mm.
hmm
At least not yet. We haven't gotten like Jamie and Gordon interludes or whatever.
hmm
Um, and but I don't know if it's that or if it's just Wildbow's so fucking good at it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's
I'll be honest. You point out that we're good at pointing out Sai being wrong about this or whatever. When I'm reading it, I'm 100% Sai said it. It's true.
yep.
When I'm talking about it on the podcast, I'm 100% Sai said it. It's probably false.
Yeah, I definitely have to read. I definitely read these chapters at least twice, if not three times. The first time, it's like, okay, I'm just going through this. Sigh. Yep, you're legit. You're right. That's what's going on. Afterwards, like, wait, no, that doesn't quite. Are you sure? Are you sure about this?
It does suck you in. It's
Yeah,
very. It's. I 100% agree with that.
Mhm.
yeah.
That has. Yeah.
And I guess we don't get that as much in Pale because we have three protagonists. It's we see them inside their heads
Mhm.
as well as you know the other two are able to call them out when they're you know on their bullshit for whatever reason.
I also think there's something about the first person perspective that makes
hmm
you just a little bit closer.
That's true.
Um,
Mhm.
because we are really, really close to Lucy and Avery, and then Avery and Verona in their perspectives. But there's something about the I statement
Yeah.
that feels more authoritative, I guess.
hmm
And
That's valid.
yeah,
It's hard to have an unreliable narrator if the narrator is third person. Well, it's easier to spot the unreliable narrator if the narrator is not the character.
mm,
Mhm.
Anyway, um, I did think it was really interesting that we were talking about size, protection or like protective thought process around the different lambs and how protective he is of the lambs, and how that extends even to the ones that he never met.
Mhm.
He gets immediately angry and defensive when Briggs is doing his whatever, saying whatever he was saying about the lambs that weren't actually that were failed projects.
Hmm.
Is this when we learn that the names he said to Mary were like actual
Yeah, I
people that
think so.
existed? Like there's just like and like that and she just reveals that to everyone else in this like conversation, and it's just like this huge like blah.
Yep.
It felt like a big moment.
Hmm.
And like says something about Sai and his relationship with Mary, that he did that while she's like trying to kill him or whatever. I don't know. There was something where it was like, wait, that was real? What are you talking about?
Yeah. It's like you didn't have to use the real names, you know? It's
I guess he works with what he has.
hmm I guess not as quick on his feet as like I guess he thinks he is.
He does. There would be a risk that he'd like forget the name that he used or
That's
something.
true. I guess, yeah. It's
Yeah.
easier to lie if
He has noted his lack of memory,
Mhm.
so
yeah.
yeah. It's nice that he's protective of the people he
Yeah.
doesn't know, though.
And I think this was the first chapter that we learn this is when we learn that like I think Gordon implies that they weren't just not viable, that like they actually got rid of them because he says that he's old enough to actually remember them, which implies that he interacted with them and they were running around and that he remembers what happened to them, which was a result of someone being angry at them the way Hale is angry at Sai.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Which
I saw your note on that, and I was like, I don't think that implies it. But then I went to read the actual quote, and the way Gordon phrases it definitely does imply
yeah,
that.
it's like
Because Sai says, I think you're being paranoid. They're not going to toss us out. I think, Gordon said very carefully, that out of two of us, I'm the one who has faint memories of your predecessor.
yeah, like
That's
that.
interesting. Yeah, I wasn't reading that closely. And the first time I think I assumed that like, like we know that there's like surgeries or chemicals or something being used on these kids, and I think that I just assumed that like they couldn't handle it and they
Yeah,
died.
that was my interpretation until
Mhm.
this line, and
Damn.
it makes it a lot grimmer. I guess that Sai's using their names or that Sai is so protective.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean we've also noted that Gordon is prone to underhanded semi truths as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
That is true, but the way that that line reads doesn't read as a
mhm,
semi-truth.
yeah, Gordon is definitely implying that
Yeah,
they got kicked out,
whatever that means.
whatever that
Mm-hmm.
means. Which Gordon also says
Mhm.
that he doesn't know what that
Yeah.
means.
And yeah,
um,
to me again, this circles back to like what is it that's keeping them willing to work for this academy when I mean, I guess it's just the fact that they could got like Ashton and Yvette or whatever. But it seems like an incentive for them to fight against
Mhm.
the man.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of, I think we're done with the Sylvester
Yeah.
notes. Speaking of Gordon and his being underhanded, I thought it was okay. So first of all, is an interesting bit of uh, Gordon characterization when Sai says he's so good at sounding sincere, but then at the end of that chapter, the professors are like, "Can you take care of this Mauer situation? Can you handle this?" And he is like, "Yes."
Mhm.
And I'm like, he's so good at sounding sincere.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I thought that was a good build up for that because, yeah, Gordon is so interesting.
Mhm.
Just another fun example of how they bounce off of each other well, because you need Sai to get in there and ask for the badges and be a dickhead,
Mhm.
maybe, but you really need Gordon to be able to stand up there and be like, "Yeah, definitely." Because, like, I mean, I guess, like, Jamie or Lillian or someone else could fill that role, but it doesn't work quite as well
No.
as Gordon doing it. Um,
Mhm.
And even Helen I don't think could pull it off the way
Right.
And and she's the one who's in theory meant to be like you said, stand in as the face occasionally when she needs to be.
Right. And, like, Sai's so full of shit that Sai saying it means nothing, right? So
Oh,
you need
and
Yep.
someone.
everybody knows that it means absolutely nothing.
Right. And, like, yeah, Mary's, like, so it's just they're fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did kind of like the professor's like, wait, why are there more of them now? Like, what is going on?
And he was like, "I promise I didn't spend any money on that one." Like, she was co-opted.
We
Mhm.
stole her.
Yep.
Yeah.
First you had side of the project, now you're adding Mary. Like, what's next?
And Lillian
You'll be running your own academy.
And also, yeah, good. Yeah, you just mentioned Lillian. Like, yeah, is he paying her tuition fees? Like, she's going to the academy for free because she's paying it by being with the lambs. But presumably that means that Hale is paying her academy fees. Is that coming out of the budget? Like, or is he paying out of his own fortune, his own money? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Just
I
sounds
mean,
like
Maybe there's a scholarship or something.
right.
sounds like a
I
bit
feel
of
like
grift involved. If she's using the budget to like pay, I don't know, because she's not on scholarship, right? Like,
Well, this is
she
her
sort of
scholarship.
is, right?
yeah, but
This is what a scholarship is. It's when they pay your tuition for you.
yes. No, but what I'm saying is that I don't, as far as I know, most scholarships don't involve following around your clandestine secret projects.
It's work study. Okay.
Yep.
We had a very interesting dynamic between Mary and Helen
Absolutely.
in this, starting from when Helen turns to her and is like, they're
Like us.
I'm back. Well, yeah, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's like, yeah, backroading, like me, like you.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary is just like,
What?
And
And then she touches her face.
Oh my god. Why, Helen? You know that it's like she definitely knows that that's upsetting, but there's enough like
Does she though?
no, that's the thing.
Exactly.
No,
Yeah. That's
she totally does.
100%.
But there's enough doubt, especially in Mary's mind,
Mm-hmm.
that it makes it so she can't just be like, "Fuck you, Helen, please."
Yeah. It's like the same kind of thing later on when Helen like gets Cecil out of the way by having him walk with Lacey, and it's like, Helen, you like that was clearly like you're being shitty to Lacey here, and it, like it, but
I
like
love
Helen's
so
just she's great.
yeah. Because that was saying that Ashton and Yvette were both vat grown, right?
Yeah.
And so the statement was that Cy, Jamie, Gordon were not.
I think that's the
Yeah.
implication then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think that Sai said that explicitly before, that Helen was unlike the rest of them in being built from scratch.
I wonder why Ashton and Yvette were. Like, what were their functions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, at least some of them, their function was to be Psy. But does it take two of them to be Psy? Does it?
Was their function to be Psy, or did they just not have a plan for someone to be Psy?
The fact that Gordon calls them his predecessors makes me think that doesn't.
That's fair.
It doesn't, necessarily mean that. Just
maybe they weren't together at the same time either. Maybe it was like we built Ashton failed, so we tried replacing him with Yvette,
and that didn't work.
And Yvette
out.
failed, so then we tried replacing them with Psy, and so far that seems to be working okay, even though he's a pain in the behind most of the time.
Yeah. Though I wonder how those two not working out ties into those expiration dates that we know they all have. Or the rest of them have. I don't remember if Psy has one.
Well, Psy definitely had one.
Did he?
Because that's what he was looking at.
I thought he was looking for the others.
He wanted to see all of them, I thought, but I'm not sure. He's like,
I'm pretty sure he wanted to see his
one, but
yeah, presumably. Yeah, maybe that was kind of like they were trying to design a Psy, but they couldn't get the expiration date to last longer than like a year or two,
Mm-hmm.
and like, fine, we give up. We'll just use like
Some regular little orphan that we can turn into.
Yeah, I guess I assumed that like they were very specific shapes that were supposed to fit into the puzzle. And then when their shapes were missing, Sai was this like weird putty glue that they just like jammed into it. So not necessarily that like they were supposed to do, but like Sai is filling in their gaps, not that like they were supposed to do the same thing.
Makes sense.
I think that's the most likely. Yeah.
Also, especially considering they talk about how they've had to fill in, like all of them have kind of had to grow to fill in some of those gaps. So
Like, what are they missing without Sai? They're missing like the like
asshole.
Yeah, the impetuous like shithead. Like,
well, when they were at Mathmont, like they were struggling without him, and
they absolutely were.
So
the
doing without Sai is
the pusher. Sai like Sai makes things happen. He like pushes.
Yeah.
So Ashen was the pusher, and Evie climbed buildings.
Yeah. Okay. Those are both useful.
Yep. That's it.
Neither of them could fight at all.
They're like, we've got an idea for one that can fight, but we're saving it for if Sai fails, and attempt 4 will be the fighting one.
Well, no, I mean, come on. Do you think they want someone like Sai able to fight? It's an insurance to make sure that he can't fight.
Did they have different project names, and do we know them?
I don't think we know them.
I don't think we know them. Because
that could
I remember
be interesting.
Yeah, definitely, because that we kind of know some things about the projects based on the names. So yeah, I think we would have talked about the names, and I would have remembered talking about the names if we knew them.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
it's like Griffin, Caterpillar, Wyvern, and is it like Galatea or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Cool. That's such a good one.
Yeah.
It really is. And then Project Work Study Program.
Yep.
Project Work Study. What would Mary be like? Project Knives? Like
Project Ribbons.
Oh, Ribbons. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I do imagine. I don't remember if Mary was ever
Project Marionette.
Because he was the puppet. No, that was the Bad Seeds. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was the
puppet
master.
Puppeteer, yeah.
Or puppeteer, yeah.
I wonder if Sai is going to try and come up with one for her.
For Mary, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of am...
Well, she started out as Percy's whole cloning project started out as an academy project, so presumably he would have had a name for it.
Yeah. Or at least the ideas were there, yeah.
The seeds of an idea.
I got you.
Yeah. Yeah. On the subject of Mary and Helen, just quickly, the fact that Gordon is deliberately well, Sai thinks it's deliberate, and I think he's right.
I'm inclined to believe him, yeah.
That Gordon is deliberately stoking Mary's fears about Helen. And he's probably, if he is, he's probably doing it just to keep her in line, because he
suspects her because she's suspicious.
Either doesn't trust her or thinks it's possible. But yeah, I mean, poor Mary. She doesn't deserve to be that afraid of Helen. Helen's really nice once you get to know her. As, Sai sort of dances around her because he knows her so well.
Yeah. Speaking of Helen, though, I don't know that I have a lot more to say to this because we haven't seen much more of it, but I don't think we've talked enough really about the sort of the abusive and exploitative nature of Helen and Ibbot's relationship. She refers to herself as Ibbot's daughter, as a way to get in through the door, but I would be willing to believe that she does see herself as his daughter, and I'd be willing to bet just as much that he absolutely does not.
This is another thing that Mary and Helen have in common.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's. I said we don't really have much more to say on the subject because we don't get more of their interaction.
Yeah,
but it's a gross relationship.
Yeah, Professor Ibbot seems like a pretty nasty,
awful,
yeah,
character. Yeah.
I did just unless do either of you have anything else to say about Helen?
Not really.
Except she's great and I love her.
I do
She's
love Helen.
excellent.
Helen is the best.
This is like possibly the one podcast about Twig I will be on. I want to say I love Helen. If I was,
What, are you already saying you don't want to ever come back?
well, I don't know. Y'all want variety? I'll come back.
Hooray!
Yeah. She hated this so much.
I was gonna demand a large section where I got to like gush about Jamie and how perfect he is. We don't get a ton of him in these chapters, but we do get the fight, which is very fun.
Yes.
But
well, you've read very far ahead, so you know all the best Jamie chapters that you.
Right, I should figure out which ones those were so I could be like, let me on.
Sure. Go back and reread all of Twig just to find the Jamie.
Worth it.
He's just so good.
He is very good.
He's sweet.
Yeah.
But
we didn't see very much of him in these chapters.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I didn't make any notes about him at all. Poor Jamie.
Yeah.
I didn't have any notes about Lillian either, but somebody puts them in.
Oh, we already ended up talking about the things that I wanted to mention about Lillian.
Oh.
Like her bag of poisons and
we had a couple interesting things about Mary. I think we talked about a few of them.
I did like the way, and this is either manipulating the group so that she's more firmly ensconced, or actually being part of the group. I liked that she played along with their game of like who gets to name this person fast, and she just name dropped the shepherd in there. Just casually.
We've mentioned before that she's really fitting into this group like abnormally well, and this is just another instance of that.
Yep.
And it felt very, I mean, she seems pretty competitive, and it was really fun that, she learned it was just with Whiskers that she learned that, right? And she's on it. She names the next thing, and like, she's so nonchalant about it, and it's a great name.
Oh yeah, it's
so
perfect.
proud of her.
I love how she just so casually, it's just like in the conversation, it's not like, oh, we should name him Shepherd. It's like, oh, and the shepherd's doing this, and it's like, wait, hold up a second.
I'll be honest, if they hadn't pointed it out afterward, like if Sai hadn't insisted on going back to it, I would just like, oh yeah, we've been calling him that this whole time.
Yep, absolutely.
The fact that she's very like nifty, like it feels like she's very like, I don't know if MacGyver-y is the right word, but the fact that she like knows how to measure out a teaspoon, like her nail is the specific size for something. Like it was very fun, or it's fun seeing Mary's utility. And that was a fun kind of like Lily and Mary interaction.
Yeah, we also had that thing where she was talking about like sneaking into the academy and causing a scene and whatever. There's like we got a few different. Well, we've been kind of getting hints at Mary's abilities for a while because we had that whole balance on the roof thing.
Yeah.
Last chapter. It's just like every chapter we'll see a new Mary ability.
It feels like she could have been slotted in instead of Sai into the group and filled more of those vacant niches. Than
they could replace the whole Lambsbridge project with Mary. And
yeah.
Do it all. She and Lillian are a really interesting pair because it feels like they're the newest comers to this group, and it feels like they both are trying to prove themselves. Like I think that Lillian is like, she's a student. She's almost a little bit more like Lacey or one of the other people who works for the academy and is like assisting. But I think she still is like she's trying to prove herself and fit in and be useful. She needs to be useful in order to keep her scholarship. And Mary is like alone now. And so Mary like needs to fit in with this group of people, or like where's she gonna go? But I think maybe part of their friendship or whatever is that they can like relate to the fact that they're both trying to like be cool and fit in.
Yeah.
Like Mary's like potentially taking the opportunity, like somewhat taking the initiative to just make a distraction and break into the school, or like, don't get out your shit, Lillian, I'll just measure the teaspoon with my eyes or whatever. Like
Because I can
it's
do that. I'm just super cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're both, I don't know. They're great.
Yeah. And now they're best friends.
Mm-hmm. Sai's all jealous.
Sai hates it.
It's like, it's not fair. She had more time with her than I did.
So funny.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, other people, we've already said everything about Ashton and Yvette, I think, that we can come up with. Vernon, I said we would talk more about him. He is annoying, but we noted that he did something that he was behaving normally.
He's doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We did have the interesting bit about his group project. It's like, Jamie going at him and being like, "Oh well, I remember what you did, so clearly it must have been notable." It's like
that was so rude. It was like, no, Jamie, like, you know that's not why. You're
coming
totally
from
like,
anyone, coming from literally anyone else, that would have been a good point.
But he's using that just to make him feel bad, which
Yep.
it works.
I love that he's like, he does like, no, I don't think this is gonna make me let you get in there. It's just, you suck.
Yeah, and I liked that they were the description of the group project, where he's like, your job is to make a smaller, lighter pack for field care of soldiers and stitched, and you ended up with a bigger, heavier pack. I just failed on every count. Yeah. Which, given how much they love failed projects around here, probably is in common use now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely kind of, because it's the academy, I kind of pictured this like first aid kit being like a slug thing that you feed and then it turns into a part of you to heal you.
Oh.
Probably, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, because if it was like just like material science, like they don't care about that stuff.
No, exactly. Like, what kind of you're gonna engineer a lighter bandage? Like, that's not interesting. It's not. Doesn't get you anywhere except, I guess, guarding a door.
Yep.
Yep. And I just interesting again. Moving on from, unless there's something else to say about Mr. Cornett.
I think that is all there is to say about.
And I would be willing to bet that is all there is to say about Vernon Cornett for the rest of the story.
Yep. Even if you were
till Arc 5.
The main character of Enemy Number 7 or whatever.
Right.
No, even if you knew him personally and were best friends with him, like all there really is to say about the guy is, oh yeah, this one time he tried to design a field kit and failed miserably.
I thought it was interesting that Sai, just with Hale, I think we've already talked about their interactions mostly, but just that Sai kind of judges all the other professors because they've had work done and Hale has not, and like Sai just looks down a little bit on the rest of them.
That could be because Sai, being a experiment, is a person who's had work done. And he's like, maybe. You people are like me and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, I can see that. Though
that just occurred to me right now.
I think that's probably giving Sai a bit more credit than
probably
actually due.
Probably.
Like, I'm sure I can see that being part of the his mental framework. But I don't think that he necessarily has internalized or like articulated that to himself.
It was an interesting description of, if I remember right, this was Briggs, who had been altered to be like significantly taller, but like no heavier. So he just became this like stretchy, right? Like extended, like taller, like thinner in a weird way person. And it's interesting thinking about like fashion and trends, and I could see how something like that could be fashionable and trendy for a bit. But how it feels so odd. And like I'm wondering, what sorts of like, there's already so many things in our society that people will do and pay for, to have, like, bigger butts or, like, gauges exist, right? Like, there's all sorts of things people do to their bodies.
Or the guy
Um
who turned himself into a border collie or whatever it was a few months ago. I don't know if that was fake, but it was on the internet for a while.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, the guy with the suit! Wasn't that a suit?
Oh, no,
No,
no, the okay,
I
according
thought
to
it
the
was a
Daily
suit.
Mail, which is absolutely no, yeah, the man spends US $14,000 to turn himself into a dog.
No.
Yes, this is a costume.
Yep, it is a costume.
Oh,
Never
thank
mind.
God, okay.
I kind of did not want to go deeper into like the rabbit hole of potentially someone having spent that much money to surgically alter himself. So,
Can you
But, like,
imagine?
right?
yeah, and, like, but in this universe, like,
Someone could.
and has, and did, and thinking about how fashion changes and, like, the
Mhm.
things that they would have to do to, like, put themselves back, and it's just I don't know, it's really interesting to think about, and it is a thing I think in our society where we judge people who get Botox or
Mhm.
whatever, but then we also judge people for looking the way that people who haven't had Botox
Yeah.
look when they age, and, um, yeah, so it feels a little shitty of side to be so judgmental, but also feel shitty of other people to be so vain? I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah. I no, I'm
No matter what you do, it's shitty.
yeah.
Sorry.
And it's a good point, and like there, you're right that it must be a fashion statement of this guy to be extendable or whatever. But
The
like,
last man.
but yeah, it's like who sets these kinds of trends for this kind of world? Is there like an aristocratic class of people who does? Is it these professors who are the celebrities? We know Ibad is kind of a celebrity. Like, is did he do this to himself? Because like, oh, being tall makes me look more powerful. And then is there like people are gonna be like, oh, look, the guy in charge of the academy did that to himself. I'm gonna do that to myself too.
It's the obligatory mention of Mrs. What's her name in the street with the dog.
Yep, yep,
I
exactly.
feel like she is the trendsetter.
Yes.
She does it all.
Have we gone a single episode without
I don't think
mentioning Mrs.
Mrs. Thetford is actually the protagonist of this story.
Actually, she's only the companion of her giant rabbit fetus, which is the protagonist. But yeah, I mean, again, that's a good point. We know, yeah, like she serves as that example from the beginning to tell us that what that fashion is different and that there are absolutely different aesthetics that are mainstream than what we would consider good
Mhm.
looking or fashionable.
Mhm.
Yep.
Kind of like the aesthetics of the Hunger Games, where
Yeah,
they've just like reimagined
Mm.
the,
human form.
well, not just the human form, but just like the idea of what would be fashionable or
Hmm.
popular. Next,
So,
we have Briggs,
hmm
which we've talked about Briggs a lot.
yeah. And
Well, we just talked about him being stretchy,
mhm.
and
It's probably not the right word, but yes.
yeah,
I thought it was interesting how aloof he is. Like everybody seems
Mm.
to be looking to him for, the answer to like what does the academy do, and he does not seem to give a shit about what's going on at all. It specifically mentioned that his personal pet project, whatever it is not out there hunting whiskers or dealing with the thing. So, he seems extremely unconcerned until it's brought up that it could be embarrassing to the academy and probably therefore to him if
Mhm.
things got out of hand.
hmm I mean, I kind of thought maybe his pet project couldn't be out there hunting because it's not a hunting sort of project.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
maybe his pet project is Claret Hall.
Send Claret Hall crawling down the street on
Yes,
viney feet.
Claret Hall can't be hunting whiskers, but it is a very impressive project.
That is true.
Uh-huh.
That is
I mean,
true.
Uh-huh.
He's just
Mhm.
always thinking about renovations, like looking at carpet samples and
He made
all
himself
those.
extra tall so he could actually get a better perspective on the whole place.
Oh. Yeah.
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 But
On the subject of him like being aloof,
Mhm.
just like the whole like his complete lack of a reaction to everything Sai threw at him, like just like, I don't care. I'm just gonna
Blow it all up
just
and start
blow
over
yeah.
again.
Like, but it might hurt us, don't care. But it might hurt you, don't care. But it might make Redham look dumb, don't care. Wait, maybe I do care about that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like, we talked about Twig being biopunk, and this feels like that scene in a lot of those kinds of movies or books or shows where like there's the board meeting with the executives who are like, we know that our project or these products are bad and like poisoning people, and we absolutely do not care. Just throw it, get it out there,
Yep.
make more money, and if it ever comes back to us, which it won't, we'll just be on the golf course being rich and it won't matter.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
Yeah, he's very much a don't care.
mhm.
So long as it, yeah, like he said to Hale, like, so long as you're not taking money from the budget, I literally do not care what you do with your project.
It's like they're still alive. Good for you.
Mhm. Oh, they're dead now? Tough. I still don't care.
You're not
This is a
getting money
really
for
nice
more of them.
wine.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like if you want to get more of them, you're gonna have to go where Mary was found and find yourself another one.
Yep.
Adopting stray projects from the street.
Hmm. The other
Which is
props
why
are. Sorry, go ahead.
no, it goes never mind. Not important enough to
Well, now you have to say it. No, I'm
I
kidding.
should say then they should have adopted the cat snake thing as their team mascot.
Oh.
Because we don't have a Scooby Doo for this Scooby Gang, and that
Yeah,
could have been
that would be a
the
good
Venom
one.
cat pet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, they could adopt Whiskers.
Yeah, there's not much to say about the other professors
I
except
think
the
we've
fact.
said everything about them
Yeah,
already.
yeah. They just
Mhm. They're there.
yep. They make fun of Hale. And Hale is very hurt, except not really. It's like
I mean, he probably makes fun of them behind their backs too.
Right.
yeah.
He's waiting to.
as we said they're all crabs in a bucket.
Yep.
And then we get to Cecil and Lacey.
Yes.
Or
So Cecil
Cecil.
or Cecil, I guess, could be.
Mm.
Seal.
Cecile.
Cecile.
So I've been listening to a lot of Welcome to Night Vale
Oh,
recently,
Oh yeah.
which is a very fun program. But the voice of Night Vale is Cecil, the radio presenter. And so
Mhm.
when I see the name Cecil, I think Cecil from Night Vale.
Right.
nice.
And Cecil is married to a scientist with his who wears his lab coat everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy is wearing his lab coat everywhere. So clearly this is alternative universe.
Mm-hmm.
Cecil, he's married to a radio presenter. And yes, that's just where my brain puts him because of that association.
Except Cecil here is incredibly stupid and shitty.
He is one of those people who
see,
doesn't remember what it was like to be a child at all.
Uh-huh.
yes, but also like he comes across as very stupid, but I think it's more exaggerated because he doesn't know what's going on.
But then
Like
Shut up.
these are like he thinks these are children. He's like, you are children. We
But-
should behave as if you are children. He doesn't know that they're like super powered magic children.
but
He
doesn't
thinks that
have
they're just kids.
But the way that Hale and Lacey interacts with them should kind of be a hint to him that maybe these aren't just children.
Especially the like explicit direction to do what they tell you within
Yeah.
reason.
Because like
Yes.
Hale says that and he says sure, and you know that he's immediately like, yeah, I'm in charge of this, I'm running this thing.
Mhm. See, I think that if he were stupid, then he would just be like, oh, he told me to just do what they say. I'll just do what they say. I'm too dumb to think for myself, whatever. But he's actually smarter than that. He's like, wait a second, Hale is very negligent of these children in his care. Lacey is very negligent of these children in his care. I'm a responsible adult. Like, let's take some responsibility for these kids and like not let them waltz right into the enemy's camp.
As a counterpoint to him not being stupid, he he happens to be in the right place and the right time and lucks into this because he's the one who runs into the tell them like, oh, another project is 3 projects escaped, whatever. And Hale's like, all right, you come with me, you're an adult, I'll use you.
Yep.
And he's like, he's like, oh, when I'm a professor, and then he's explicitly given, okay, if you do this, we'll give you a lab. You can do whatever project he wants. And then he says, I actually don't care about any of my projects, but I have a friend who does. It's like, you were just given the opportunity that I'm sure everybody in this academy would kill for, and you don't care enough to use it. Like you don't have something you're interested enough. You're like, there's no way this man is ever going to be a professor at the academy.
Well,
Mhm.
he's not ambitious enough to fit the academy's
No, but
profile of desired professors.
he explicitly says, when I'm a professor, I am going to be better to the common man than Hale is.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, he clearly wants to be a professor, but then
I think part of it is he's just very arrogant and full of himself.
Mhm.
He doesn't understand, like, he thinks he's better and smarter and in a better position than he is.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
absolutely.
He probably comes from like a fairly privileged place and doesn't realize like how precarious
Everybody's position is.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
well, I mean, just the way he interacts with Lacey is
Blech.
very much, well, yeah, gross. But it definitely, like you said, comes. It looks like it comes from this place of privilege. He can't conceive that this attractive young lady wouldn't want to be holding his arm as they walk
Mhm.
down the street.
Was he flirting with her after she had like indicated that she didn't care for his attention?
Absolutely.
Because
Um,
like,
like he kind of she kind of immediately shuts it down, and then Helen's like, "Why don't you hold her arm and walk 10 feet ahead of us?"
well, yes,
And
but this quote here, where it's like, "What if this attractive young lady and I were to go alone?" It's like that's just him being flirtatious with a lady that he thinks is interesting. Like, there's nothing gross about that until she shuts him down, and then he carries on with it.
the phrasing of it is gross to me. I don't just the way
Yes,
he
probably.
says it
Something about
feels
it
slimy.
not being directed at her
Yeah,
feels
Okay.
that's
Okay.
exactly
gross.
like it's slimy.
But
Hmm.
Mhm.
I think it's also just at this point he's someone I don't like, and so I
Yeah,
assume that this
Yes.
is yeah.
Yep.
we've already seen him be obnoxious and dumb throughout this chapter.
Hmm.
And again, he just gives away the opportunity of a lifetime for someone in his position because he tells one of the people in charge of the academy, I'm not actually passionate about the work we do. Like that's not a way to get a promotion. Um
Yeah.
and
So really, the fact that Lacey shuts him down so hard is
it's a wake up
a
call
point in her
and
favor.
I love Lacey. Lacey deserves
uh
so much better than everything. And
Yes.
yeah,
so I'm such an ass to her.
Yes.
Lacey's great. She's such a cool character.
Mhm.
I really liked the line when we see her for the first time again. She looked very human and very grounded, standing out in her white coat. And the fact that she's described as looking so human compared to all these other descriptions of all these other characters we get, all seem so cartoonish almost and over the top. And she is just a person.
Mhm.
It just, no,
Yep.
like it makes her stand out in a really interesting way.
Hmm.
Like I don't necessarily know what Wildbow is trying to say there or is saying there. Um, but I just thought the fact that like he specifically uses the word human looking is interesting.
Hmm. In this world of modified humans and
Yeah.
monsters.
Hmm. And this is again coming from Sai, and as you pointed out earlier, Malia, that I think it was you, it might have been Dante, but one of you. I'm getting a little tired here. Um, uh,
We're very easily confused.
mhm. Um, he said, or one of you said that Sai seems to potentially be looking down on people who are modified as like, or not
Mm.
looking down, but like you're not better than I am. And
Pretty sure it was you who said that.
no, I thought it was you. I'm fairly certain it was not me who said that. Well, if it is, it was a very insightful statement. But yeah, I think this is Sai again showing more respect than he recognizes to
Hmm.
Lacey.
hmm Yeah.
That's really all I have to say about that.
Well, and Sai does try and, well, he says he
True.
tries to get on her good side by
Yeah.
having her be his sister instead of his mom or whatever.
I mean, and
she
presumably,
is just like, nice try, Sai.
presumably I imagine she was like early 20s and Sai's like 13, you know. She's older sister age, not mom age for Sai, I think.
But it was interesting, like, so the plan they sort of confer as they're walking in is that Cecil's their teacher or
Yeah.
something, and then I guess just, like, why would their significantly older sister be with them if it's supposed to be a teacher group? Like, they were sort of, I think Sai or someone was sort of like, "Or you can be an assistant or a colleague," and I was
Mhm.
like, "That makes way more sense for, like, both of them to be
Yeah.
teachers and
Mhm.
for you all to be students and not related in any way to each
Yep.
other." I
Yeah.
just like, this is a weird plan, and it got slightly better, but I wonder what they're doing. Like, you know, what will the dynamic be?
Mhm.
That man is a teacher of these children that he obviously cares about will be fascinating.
Well, we won't find out because Mauer knows Mary.
He...
So before we move on to the last ending bits here, do you have anything else you want to say about these chapters or the
Oh, I do
character?
have something I want to say
Cool.
that I forgot to say earlier, even though I definitely was going to. So we're recording this on Saturday evening at the same time that Pale Reflections does their live recording. And so before we came in here, I thought I'd tune in for a few minutes and see what sort of shenanigans they're up to. And they were talking about Twig.
What?
What?
Yeah, so I'm trying to decide if I can say this without spoilers for Pale, but I don't think I can. So, Pale spoilers. In the most recent chapters, there's a lot of school imagery going on.
Mhm.
And they were saying that this school imagery with the hallways lined with windows and so forth is very reminiscent of Muthmont.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, it really is. And
Mhm.
I didn't realize, was that Ruben or Elliot? I didn't realize they'd started reading Twig.
I didn't think
yeah,
either
so
of them had.
Elliot apparently has read the first arc
Oh,
of
cool.
Twig. I was like, yeah.
Newly read or
No, I think he said it was a while ago. He read it, and the school in the Crucible
Mhm.
reminded him of that, and I was like,
Yeah, I can see that.
So
Continuing on the Pale spoilers, I really, really got a kick out of the name of the antagonist practitioner in the school. It was like Albus Lionheart or whatever. It's just like the most generically shitty like fantasy name that you could come up with.
It's really
Yep.
good.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we did have a discussion question that we had running for the past 4 weeks.
Which is the same amount of time as most of our discussion questions have been.
Correct, but it has been for more episodes than most of them have been.
Yes.
And our question was, tell us what other body parts correspond to features of the Academy in relation to, obviously Claret Hall was the heart and the hedge was the skin. So we got a few answers.
Hobo Demon said, I don't think the voltaic generators are described or detailed yet, but whatever they use for electric power plants has got to be the mitochondria. Segue to Biology Corner and new favorite parasite. There's an endoparasite impacting the salmon population that doesn't have mitochondria. The biochemical pathway it uses for energy is completely unknown, and it's theorized to have originated as a metastasized tumor from a jellyfish that is just doing its own thing now. Just in
I don't
case you
like
didn't
that.
have enough thalassophobia.
I
Ew.
absolutely do not like that. I
How
don't
dare
like the
they?
idea of a cancer getting free and roaming the world and predating things.
It sounds like the plot of a bad horror film.
It does. Yep. And then Sleepy Stapler says, I'll say that acquisitions portions of the academies like the digestive systems, purchasing and processing raw materials to be used in the bowels. We haven't seen this department, but someone has to be buying the flesh, even if it is cheap. The doctors and professors themselves are a bit like gametes, spreading far and wide outside of their academy of origin, and sometimes when they meet up, new academies are born. They're more analogous to the spores of a fungus than the sperm and egg cells of people, though. I had not actually read that answer ahead of time. It's like
That's great.
kept going in directions I was not expecting it to go as I kept. Yeah. And they also say we could also consider the lambs and other secret projects to be the immune system, killing outside threats before they become an issue and rooting out internal things that aren't working to benefit the body as a whole. Gorger would act like a white blood cells based on the name.
Yeah.
So yeah, I buy that. I like that. And we do have a new discussion question, courtesy of Malia.
Woo. So we want y'all to tell us about a story where the protagonist or like group of protagonists has a characteristic that both helps them and hurts them in kind of the same way and how they deal with it. So this is inspired by the fact that like the lambs are children and that's really useful because they're underestimated, but it's really frustrating because they're underestimated. As we see with their interactions with adults in these chapters, it can be really annoying that they're kids, but as we have seen, it can be really useful that they're kids. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
looking forward to seeing what the recommendations are out of these stories here and
Mm-hmm.
the
And
answers.
we'll add them to our to read lists as we usually do.
So yeah, we're getting to the end here. So thank you, Malia, again for coming on. Really appreciated. Is there anything you would like to tell us about?
Well, we
Um,
we talked about it a little bit at the
we
beginning,
did.
but
We
we
talked about it a
are
lot at the beginning.
but my sister and I do a podcast called Pale in Comparison. And we are coming to the end of our packed read through.
Tragedy.
Which has a lot of I have a lot of mixed feelings, but I'm very
Yeah,
excited
it's
to dig
sad.
into like packed spoiler world and to be able to be like, I'm here. I can make the jokes now. Um
Mhm.
and then my husband and I will someday do a podcast, I hope, and
On birds.
we'll tell y'all all about it and it'll be great. Um and yeah, other Doof Media stuff is cool and exciting.
I believe you guys
And
have a art contest. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
yeah. um so Doof Media sponsors an art contest. Our goal is to do one like every quarter. And so we're running one right now. And the theme is closure. So the goal is to just like inspire people to make fan art about Wild Bow's works. So it can be any one of Wild Bow's works, including Twig.
Is
Where
that
you
new? Because I feel like you have excluded Twig in the past.
I think that since we've been running it, Twig's been included. Originally they were just parahumans, and then I think when Elliot and Ruben joined Doof, they added the other verse. But I think Twig has been included. It's it's not as represented, so all of you listening should go think about Closure and Twig and come up with some sort of art and submit it. The Our Doof Media's patrons vote to help determine the winner, and the winner and the runner up receive a little bit of money, and it's fun seeing the stuff people make.
Yeah,
And
cool fan art.
yeah.
Fan art is awesome.
Absolutely. Great. Okay. Just I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to put in there. Someone mentioned.
I put in that if you wanted to put in something about the Maui relief organizations, like you have been in your podcast, that
Yeah.
you could if you wanted to.
No
Um
pressure. No.
Lahaina Yeah, Maui has had a lot of tragedy recently with the fires and stuff, and a lot of people need help. So, Jenny normally has this pulled up, and I am failing. But there's
We'll drop it in our show notes.
yes, there are charities that you can donate to, that if you want to, that would really help people out. Our mom lives there, as those of you who listen to our podcast would know, and she's been volunteering. She's a retired nurse, and so she's been doing like stuff with the Red Cross, and it was, I don't know, it's neat and really awful and tragic hearing about um a lot of people's stories, but it's
Mhm.
cool the way the communities come together.
Mhm.
um but they do need help, and I finding links.
It's okay. Just send them to us,
Okay.
or send them to, yeah, I guess Dante usually does the post, but I've done them a few times. So yeah, send it to both of us in the thread, and we'll put it in the show notes as yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks y'all. It's really sad, but yeah.
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 Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. So you can again find that in our show notes along with some of the other things we talked about. I think there was something else that we said, but anyway, thank you all for listening. Um,
We're
thank you
good
for
at keeping track
scrolling.
of what we say we're going to do.
Yep.
Mhm, mhm,
Yep.
mhm.
Yep. Thank you all for still being with us on this trip into Twig. We're a little bit of the ways in, but we're no longer right at the beginning. So thank you. It's nice. You can read along with us at twigserial.wordpress.com. And if you do, or even if you don't, please go to Wildblow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildblow and support him. It's how we can produce all these different great stories and settings like Pact and Pale and Twig and the Parahumans, but Otherverse is more relevant to us right now because we have Malia on. Um, and yeah, please leave your answers to our discussion question in our Reddit thread or on the Doof Discord thread.
You can reach us at totwigpodcast@gmail.com. totwigpodcast on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Our Reddit thread in r/parahumans. Our discussion thread in the Doof Discord. Kind thanks to them for letting us squat there.
Still.
Thanks to you, Malia, as our Doof representative here
No
today.
problem. Anytime.
And next episode, we'll be talking about Cat Out of the Bag 2.7 and 2.8. And
You have the
I guess
bio
it's my
fact.
turn again because I have taken over the biology corner.
Well, you just had a really cool fact.
The fact today is that babies can recognize faces before they are born.
Do
And
There
babies
was this. Pardon?
echolocate?
Yeah, how does one
Do-
test this?
And also,
Yes.
do they echolocate? Like, what is that?
Okay, so the study that they did, they took 3 lights in a triangle shape, so like 3 dots as the corners of a triangle, and projected them through the uterus wall so that the baby could see it, the
Mhm.
fetus could see it. They would project it slightly off to the side of the face and move it away from the center of the face around their head. And the idea would be to see whether, yeah, Malia looks confused. Okay, so they shine a picture in your face and move it off to the side.
They shine a picture of a face. They're like 3 dots. Is it
3 dots.
okay? So like
Shine
our
3
pattern
dots in your
recognition,
face.
which our pattern recognition brains
Mhm.
recognize as a face.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so
Okay.
they shine the 3 dots in your face and move it off to the side. And they found that if the dots were oriented with 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top, the baby would ignore it.
That's
But if they oriented it with 2 on the top and 1 on the bottom, so that it looks like a face,
that's
the
wild.
baby would follow it as it moved,
That is
showing
Evolution.
showing that even before you've ever seen a face in your life,
you
you're
know what a face.
hardwired to recognize this pattern as worth paying attention to.
Wow.
Well, and it's kind of crazy how, yeah, like just knowing that it's so early on in our development is interesting. But like we see anything and we see faces in it.
Uh-huh.
2 windows and a door on a house is a friendly house face looking at us, or just like it's so easy to anthropomorphize anything, I guess.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yeah, it's fascinating that it's that early, and I guess it makes sense that it's so easy for us to anthropomorphize anything if it is so ingrained in our
Mhm.
being.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So,
Yep.
yeah. Fun facts.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. All right. Thank you
Well,
all for listening, and again, thank you, Malia.
Yay.
thank you for joining us. It's
Yep.
been a blast.
It's also been real long.
Yes.
Yay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Hopefully
all.
people will still, I mean, people will still want to listen because we have a special guest.
Yep.
But hopefully people will not be put off by the fact that this has been a 3-hour episode.
Well, I know my wife is certainly put off by the fact it's a 3-hour podcast. She did not seem happy when she came in earlier, but
Well,
c'est la vie. All right, have a good night, you guys. I do need to go to bed. It's ridiculously late.
it is past midnight, yes.
Yep.
All
Awesome.
right.
All right,
Thanks
bye. Do you
again,
need me?
Malia.
No problem.